Next 13, a React framework so powerful it became the new standard for creating React applications. And recently, its interest peaked, which means that now is the perfect time to build a state-of-the-art Next 13 application to showcase your abilities. In this course, you will develop a modern car showcase platform that leverages all of the latest and greatest of what Next 13 has to offer. A minimalist hero section will be a gateway into our complex search and filtering capabilities that will leverage Next.js's server-side rendering features, establishing application routes, implementing advanced search and filtering capabilities, handling and displaying data in chunks, optimizing applications metadata and SEO, creating custom filter, combo box, and modal elements, maintaining a well-organized file and folder structure, embracing the principles of writing clean code, and much more. The entire application is fully mobile responsive. This app is perfect for all car enthusiasts, and due to its complex functionalities and the ability to leverage Next.js's newest feature, it makes for an exceptional educational course you must watch if you want to become an expert Next.js developer. Specifically, we'll be transitioning from client-side rendering to server-side rendering, unlocking the Next.js's full potential. After we develop the application, I'll even teach you how to deploy to the internet so you can share it with your friends, potential employers, and put it on your portfolio. Now, you might be wondering, what are the prerequisites for building such a great application? You need to know the basics of modern web development using React.js. Other than that, this course is entirely beginner-friendly. If you're completely new to React, I would recommend checking out our React crash course. Then, if you haven't already, watch our latest Next.js crash course first by clicking the card that will appear on the screen, or click the link in the description, and then come back to build your first real Next.js 13 application by watching this video. In the last video, we've revealed that we're working on the ultimate Next 13 ebook that covers everything you need to know to become a professional Next.js developer. This ebook covers the complete Next.js roadmap, essential Next.js concepts, new Next 13 features, extensive guidance on building scalable Next.js projects, and project ideas you can build and deploy to put on your portfolio and get a job. This ebook is the most comprehensive resource we have ever created, so we put it up for sale as a paid premium ebook. Thankfully, as the last time, the first 1,000 people that click the link in the description will get it for free. So sign up right now to find out if you're in the first 1,000. Definitely don't miss out on this opportunity. Alongside building this application, you'll learn the most important technologies needed to make any website: Next.js, Tailwind, headless UI, TypeScript, and concepts like mobile responsiveness and API management. We're going to start simple and move to more complex concepts. I'll explain every step of the way. If this video reaches 20,000 likes, I'm recording more Next.js 13 videos. Now, before we dive into the project, there's something exciting I need to share with you. The app you'll build today is a light version of a more complete application our masterclass students have built in the program. So after building this Next.js 13 app, you can develop its more detailed web version by joining the masterclass. The JSM masterclass experience helps junior and intermediate developers fast-track their careers. You will develop real-world applications in a team, which is more challenging than simply following a YouTube tutorial. But this also means that you will learn so much more from the experience. You will use modern tech stacks, get personalized mentorship from senior developers, and get exceptional hiring support. You can graduate in 6 months, land your dream job in the 6 months after graduating, or get your full money back. If you want to apply, click the link in the description or go to jsmastery.pro/masterclass and apply now by filling out a 15-minute quiz. I'll personally reach out to you before we officially begin with the next cohort so you can be sure not to miss it. With that said, let's dive right into the course. Before creating a folder for our project code, we must first visit Rapid API. The link is going to be down in the description. The making of this entire app is possible only because of Rapid API. We're using their Cars by API ninjas to allow us to get detailed information about every specific unique car model. To use this API, click the Rapid API link in the description, and then you can click Sign Up or Log In. I will log in this case since I already have the account, and once you're in, you'll be redirected to Rapid API's hub, where you can find hundreds of thousands of APIs. This was our first step in our video. Now let's create our great Car Showcase app, and then later on we'll call this API straight from within it. With that said, let's get started. As we always do on the JavaScript Mastery YouTube channel, we're going to start from bare beginnings by creating a new empty folder on our desktop. Let's call it car_showcase. You can open up an empty Visual Studio Code window and then drag and drop the empty folder into it. Once you're in, you can go to your top left, View, and then Terminal. This is going to open up the integrated built-in terminal, which we're going to use to initialize our project. As you already know by now, in this project, we are using the latest version of Next.js. So let's set up a Next.js project by running npx create-next-app add latest. And then we can use the / to create it in the current directory and press enter. It might ask you if you want to install create next app. In that case, simply press Y and then enter. Then we're going to get a quick questionnaire of how we would like our app to be set up. So first of all, we have to say, would we like to use TypeScript? And in this case, we're going to press yes. Then it's going to ask us if we want to use ESLint. I'm going to say no. Then Tailwind, of course, we're going to use Tailwind. When it comes to using the source directory, we're going to say no. And finally, we are going to use the app router. Would you like to customize the default import alias? We're going to say no. And that is it. All the necessary dependencies to run our sample Next.js application are getting installed. There we go, the process has been successful, and we can run our application by running the npm run dev command. This is going to spin it up on localhost 3000, so simply click it to open it. And as you can see, we have this beautiful new starter by Vercel for the new Next.js application. Now let's put our browser and our editor side by side so we can see the changes that we make live. There we go. Let's explore the file and folder structure of a new modern Next.13 application. We're going to have the app folder, which is going to be our central hub for working with our routes and pages. And the only other thing we have is the public for our icons and assets. Everything else we're going to add ourselves. We can start working on our application by going into the app and then page.tsx. Inside of here, we can remove everything that is within the main directory. So just keep scrolling down and let's create a clean slate for ourselves to start working on this great application. If you save it, you should see just an empty screen. Let's start by creating a bit of a layout so we know where what is in our application. First, we're going to give this main a class name of overflow-hidden. And if you're unsure what some of these class names that we add mean, that means that you must be new to Tailwind CSS. But not to worry. Tailwind CSS is a really simple utility-first CSS framework packed with utility classes. But behind the scenes, it is nothing more than CSS. So if you're wondering what a specific class means, simply go to Quick Search and search for it right here. You're going to immediately get the answer of how to use that specific class. So at any point in this video, if you're unsure what some of these classes that I add mean, simply go to Tailwind Docs, go to Search, and type it out. You're going to immediately get an answer. Also, I want to point your attention to a great Visual Studio Code extension called Tailwind. Specifically, it is going to be Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. It's going to allow you to hover over specific properties and get the specific styles that it's applying. So you can see the overflow hidden, of course, is applying the overflow hidden style. And with that said, we can start creating the layout of our application. And just to be able to see the code better, I'm going to zoom it out one time so everything fits in one line. Wonderful. Immediately within our main, we can start creating our hero section, which is going to act as an entrance point to everybody wondering what this app is all about. So if we open up the finished site, just so you know, we're building something that looks like this. On desktop devices, we have a nice left side text and then right side image. And if we collapse it to a tablet view or a smaller laptop, it's going to look something like this. So let's go ahead and build this simple hero section so that we can get started with the more advanced functionalities such as search, filtering, and server-side rendering. So let's get started by calling our hero component. Right now, if we call it, we're of course going to get an error saying that the hero is not defined. So what we can do is go to the Explorer, and then we can create a new components folder in the root of our directory, right here. The reason why we didn't create it in the app directory is because with the new Next 13.4 syntax, in here, you only want to put pages, layouts, and specific Next 13 files that are going to be presented as routes in the application. And everything else we want to have outside. So within our components, we can create a new hero.tsx file. And yep, you heard that right. It's going to be TSX for TypeScript. This is one of the first videos on the JSM YouTube channel in which we're using TypeScript. But I know that you've been asking for it for a long time, so here it is. If you're happy about this and if you'd like me to do more TypeScript videos, please comment down below so that I know that you guys are happy we're transitioning JavaScript mastery to TypeScript projects. With that said, inside of here, we can run hrjavascript. This is going to create a basic hero component. And if this didn't work for you, that must mean that you don't have the ES7 Plus React Native Redux snippets extension installed. So simply install it, and that's going to allow you to simply spin up a functional component. So with that said, in here, we're going to import image coming from next/image. And we can start creating the structure for our hero section. But first, of course, we have to import it within our page.tsx. So what we can do is we can create a new file called index.ts right within our components. And we're going to use this file as a single file that's going to export all of our components so we can import them in a simpler manner within the pages where we're going to use them. So let's simply say import hero from /hero, and then we can say export hero right here. That's going to allow us now to go back into page, and then you can select the hero and press Ctrl space on Windows or something similar on Mac, and it's going to allow you to immediately import it. If that didn't work for you, no worries, you can still manually import it by simply saying import inside of curly braces hero from add/components. That is great. And as you can see, we are now rendering the hero component, which looks something like this. Now, to make the styling of our application just a bit simpler, I've prepared some utility classes that we can use throughout the rest of the project. You can think of this just as a nudge in the right direction, because it's going to allow us to focus on what matters, which is learning TypeScript, learning Next.js, server-side rendering, and more, and not necessarily just focusing on styling. So in the description down below, you can find a GitHub gist that's going to contain a globals.css file. Simply copy the code, go to the app, and then override the current globals.css by deleting it and pasting the one you copied. As soon as you do that, you're going to get an error saying that apply text-black-100 does not exist. And Next.js is right here. It doesn't. And that's because we have added that as a custom style inside of our Tailwind config.js. So once again, in the same GitHub gist down below, you're going to find the updated tailwind.config.js. Simply copy it, and then we can override the current one right here. That's going to fix the error. If it doesn't, you might do a hard reload, which is Control, Shift, and then R on Windows, and that's going to fix the error. If the error is still there, simply open up the terminal, press Ctrl C and then Y to stop it, and then finally just rerun it, and then you should be able to see just a single string that says hero on our homepage. We can close the globals, we can close everything, and just jump into the development of our layout and the hero section. To start creating our layout, we can first give our div a class name equal to hero. This is one of those utility classes that we have created. And if you're wondering what it does, you can simply go to our globals.css and search for hero. And then you can see that this is going to apply some flex properties, extra large flex row, usually flex column, gap, relative, and so on. This is going to just make the styling a bit simpler and cleaner. Finally, we're going to remove this text of hero and move down below within that hero div. We're going to create a new one with a class name equal to flex-1, padding top of 36, and padding of X, which is going to apply some horizontal padding. Within there, we can create our primary heading, which is going to have a class name equal to hero__title. Here, we're using the BEM methodology, where we specify that the hero is the block and then the title is the element within that block. Once again, if you're wondering what any of these classes mean, simply go to search and then find the CSS directives for them to see which styles are being applied. It's primarily going to be changing the font size and font boldness. Inside of here, we can say something like find, book, or rent a car quickly and easily. There we go. And we can use a long dash right here. Simply Google for the long dash and you should be able to find it. And we have a huge heading right away. Below the heading, we're going to have a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to hero__subtitle. There, we can say something like streamline your car rental experience with our effortless booking process. There we go. This is looking good. And then we want to render this button that you can see right here that's going to point to explore cars. But immediately, I want to teach you about reusability and creating components that we can reuse all across the page. You're going to notice that most of the buttons are going to end up being similar. So we want to have one component that can then be abstracted and changed depending on where it is being called. And that's exactly what we're going to do for this button. So let's create a new custom button self-closing component. And of course, if we call it right now, we're going to get an error that's going to say custom button is not defined. So not to worry, let's go into our components and let's create a new custom button.tsx component. There we can also run RAFCE and we can also export it right from our index.ts where we can say custom button and we can also export it right here. Now, if we go back to our hero section, we can double click it and then import the custom button right here by saying import custom button from /custom button. And the error should go away. That now allows us to control click into the custom button and start creating this great reusable component. Inside of our button, we can import image from next/image, as some of our buttons are going to have some kind of icons, as you can see right here. And we can start creating the structure of our button by wrapping everything within a button component. This button is going to have a couple of states. First of all, sometimes the button is going to be disabled. Right now, we're going to simply hard code that to false, but later on, we can modify that. Then the button can have a couple of different types. It can be a submit button or just a regular button. So later on, we're going to pass this dynamically, but for now, we can simply hard code a string that says button. Then we want to give it a class name. Now, this class name is going to have a custom btn class, but then later on, we might want to add some additional class names. So we're going to leave this as a template string, so we can add the classes later on. And of course, it's going to have an onClick, which for now we can leave as an empty callback function. We're going to update it with the corresponding logic later on. Now, immediately, as soon as we provided an onClick function, it's going to say that we need to convert this into a client component. And that's great. We can thank Next.js for doing that because by default, all components in Next.js are server-side rendered. They're called server components. But this button is just going to be a client-side component, which is usually the case when you have some browser actions, such as clicks or using hooks. So if you watch the Next.js crash course that we recently posted, then you know what we need to do. If you haven't watched it already, even though you've dove deep into this video right now, I would recommend to pause it, bookmark it somewhere else, and go watch the Next.js crash course because it's going to make the watching of this video so much more educational if you have the foundations laid out. With that said, what we need to do is use the useClient directive to turn this component into a client-side component, and that's going to fix the error for us. Then we can create a span element within this button, and it's going to have a class name equal to, it's going to be a template string of flex-1, and we're going to make it a template because later on we can pass some additional styles, and we can render some kind of a title of this button. So for now, we can simply say title. And there we go. We can see it right here. Now, how do we turn this into an actual reusable component? Well, the way you do that in React and Next.js is through props. So depending on where you're calling this button, you have to pass some additional props to it. So in this case, we can go back to where we're calling this button and we can pass some props. In this case, that's going to be title, which is going to be equal to explore cars. Then we can pass some additional container styles, which are going to be bg-primary-blue, text-white, rounded-full, and margin top of 10, or MT10 for short. Finally, we need to provide the handle click, which is going to be equal to a function that's going to allow us to scroll. So on top, for now, we can create a new empty function called const handle scroll, which is going to be an empty arrow function for now. And once we click the button, we can pass the handle scroll function. With that said, you're going to notice that if we save it, our TypeScript is going to complain. It's going to say, first of all, you're using some kind of a handle click right here. That must mean that your hero is a client-side component. And indeed it is. So right on top, we can use the useClient directive to turn it into a client component. Then you're going to notice that we have one more error or a warning right here saying that our title property is not assignable to our button. And that's because if we go into our button, we're using TypeScript, but we're not specifying what props can it get. So what we can do is we can create a new file, or rather a new folder in the root of our directory called types. And then within those types, we can create a new index.ts file. Inside of here, we can export and create an interface. An interface specifies how a specific structure should look like, what variables and values should it have. And in this case, we can create a custom button props interface. And it's going to have a couple of things. As we said, it's going to have a title, which is a string. It's going to have a container styles, which is going to be optional, and it's going to be a string. And finally, it's going to have the handle click, which is going to be a mouse event handler, specifically an event handler on the HTML button element. And that's going to look like this. And this mouse event handler has to be imported at the top from React. So that's going to look something like this. And the handle click is going to be optional as well, which means that we can add this question mark because sometimes it's going to be a submit button, so we don't necessarily need a handle click. Now, if we do that, you're going to notice that the error right here should disappear, or rather it's going to disappear once we actually accept these props into the button. So right here, we can destructure the props. That's going to be a title, a container styles, as well as a handle click. And now we have to specify which props does this component receive, and that's going to be custom button props. And of course, we can import that from @/types, just like so. Now, if we save that, you're going to see we have no errors. TypeScript is no longer complaining, and we are ready to actually utilize these props and turn this into a reusable button. First of all, to our button, we can pass additional dynamic container styles. This is going to make our button look like an actual button. And on the handle click, we can pass the handle click function, which in this case is a handle scroll. And most importantly, we can pass a dynamic title. And there we go. We have our Explore Cars, we have the title, and it is looking great. Now we can go back to our hero section and continue by creating this wonderful image that we can see below. So to do that, we can go below the custom button and below one more div, and then we can create a new div that's going to have a class name equal to hero__image-container. Within there, we can create one more container div that's going to have a class name equal to hero__image. And finally, within, we can have the Next.js image tag that's going to allow us to pass a source. And now in here, we have to pass the path to our actual image. So far, we don't have any assets in our project besides some icons for Next and Vercel, which we don't really need. So please allow me to give you all of the assets we'll be using throughout our project. In the description down below, you can find a new zipped public folder. So simply download it, unzip it, then delete the current public folder, and simply paste or drag and drop the new public folder right here within the root of our folder. There, you're going to have access to a lot of different icons we'll be using, as well as the hero-bg and the actual hero car image, which we'll be using for our hero section. Now, once you have your public folder, it's going to be really easy to specify the source. It's going to be simply /hero.png. Our image tag also needs an alt tag, which is going to be a hero. It's going to be fill, and it's going to have a class name equal to object-contain for it to remain in its aspect ratio. And you can see that the next image must start with a leading slash, which means that we don't want to do the /. It's just going to be /. And our car appears. Now, below our image, we also want to create a new self-closing div that's going to have a class name equal to hero__image-overlay. And this is going to give it that nice effect that you can see this rectangular shape appear. That is great. Now, our hero is looking wonderful. It is exactly the same as here, but we're missing this simple navigation bar as well as a simple footer. So before we move into the main part of this application, let's quickly add the navigation bar and the footer, not in here in the main page, but rather by utilizing the Next.js's layout. So if we go into the app folder and then to the layout.tsx, you can notice that in here, we can specify what our page is going to look like. Of course, it's a body that's going to show the children, but above or below the children, we can render some different things out. And in most cases, you want to do something like this. First of all, we don't need this font right here. Then you have our metadata, which is incredibly cool because right here, you can simply say car hub or whatever you want to call it, and that's immediately going to change on top right here. Of course, once the error is fixed. And the description can be something like discover the best cars in the world. There we go. And of course, the class of our body is simply going to be relative. We don't need that font right there. And if you do that, you can see the car hub changed on top. And now what you usually want to do in your applications is show the navbar above the body and the footer below the body. So immediately right here, we can create a navbar self-closing component as well as a footer self-closing component. And then you want to, of course, create them within our components by creating a new navbar.tsx file where we run hrjavascript, and you want to create a footer.tsx file where you run hrjavascript, and we go into the index.ts, and finally we create, or rather we import, both the navbar as well as the footer, and then we can export them right here, navbar and footer. Not footer, it's going to be a footer. And finally, we can now go back into the layout. We can double click the navbar and then get it imported. Same thing for the footer. So that's going to be import footer and navbar from add/components. If we save this, you can see that we have a simple text that says navbar on top and footer on the bottom, which means that we are ready to control click the navbar to go into it and start creating a really simple navbar layout. To do that, we can import a link coming from next/link, because after all, we're going to use the navigation bar to link to different pages. And then we're going to import the good old image coming from next/image. Finally, we're going to also import our trusted custom button component, because we'll be reusing that reusable component we created before, making our workflow even simpler. Now, for our navbar, we don't want to wrap it in a div. Rather, we want to wrap it in the HTML5 semantic header tag and give it a class name equal to w-full to take the full width, absolute, and then z index of 10, which is going to allow it to show on top of the other content. Then we want to use the nav tag and give it some class names. First, we want to give it a max-w- and then inside of square brackets 1440 pixels. That's going to be the max width. Then we want to set the margin X to auto, make it a flex container, and specify justify dash between. This is going to ensure that the items show on the left and on the right side. Finally, we want to center them vertically by giving it items-center. On small devices, the padding is going to be 16. Usually, padding is going to be 6, and we're talking about the horizontal padding, px and px here, and then the py, padding vertical, is going to be 4. This now allows us to add the link tag, and every link needs to have an href. In this case, it's going to point to /, which is just home, and it's going to have a class name equal to flex, justify-center, and items-center. Inside of it, we want to have an image, which is a self-closing tag, and it's going to have a source equal to /logo.svg. Of course, it needs to have an alt tag as well, which is going to be car hub logo, a width of 118 pixels, a height of 18 pixels, and then it's going to have a class name of object-contain to remain in its aspect ratio. And that's going to show this wonderful car hub logo. Finally, on the other side of our navigation bar, meaning outside of the link, but still inside of the nav, we want to create our custom button. And check it out how easy it is going to be right now. We can create a custom button, give it a text, sign in, give it a button type, so btn type in this case, it's going to be button, and give it a container styles equal to text-primary-blue, rounded-full, bg-white, and then min dash w dash inside of square brackets 130 pixels. Now it's going to complain because if we go into our button, you can see that we don't have a property called text. And I accidentally typed text and not title, which is great because it immediately lets me know, hey, you cannot put text there. But now it's also complaining about a button type. That's because in the custom button props, we don't yet have a button type. So if we go into the custom button props, let's add an additional btn type property, which can be either a button or it can be a type of submit. So that's going to look like this, button or submit. And it can also be optional. So now if we go back, we can now accept that btn type. And we can simply put it right here under type by saying btn type or button. Now, if we close this and go back to the navbar, you can see it's no longer complaining and we have a wonderful sign in button on top right. With that said, our hero section is looking a bit more complete because the navbar is there as well. And if we open it up and expand it, it is indeed looking great. Now, the next thing we can do is focus on the footer as well, since we're already here. So let's close the navbar and simply go into the footer component. Inside of our footer, we're going to also import the image tag coming from next/image, as well as the link tag. Import link coming from next/link. Finally, we can start creating the footer structure by giving it a HTML5 semantic footer tag and wrapping everything within it. Now, bear with me, we will have to add a couple of class names to achieve this specific structure where we have a line and then we have a couple of different rows and columns that expand depending on the screen width. So let's create that structure right away. We're going to start with the outer container by giving it a class name of flex, which is going to make it a flex container, and then flex column, which means that the flex children will appear one below another. We want to give it a text-black-100, as well as a margin or MT5 on top. We want to give it a top border, so border-T, and a border-gray-100 is going to be the border color. So now if we go back, we should be able to see a line, but it's barely visible. Next, within the footer, we want to have a div that's also going to have a class name equal to flex. Max-MD is going to be flex-call, meaning on medium devices it's going to be flex-call. Then we want to give it a flex wrap that's going to allow it to wrap the elements no matter the width. Justify-between. Gap-5 to provide some spacing between the elements. On small devices, padding X is going to be 16. Usually padding X is going to be 6. And padding Y, meaning on top and bottom, is going to be 10. Within this div, we're going to have another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-call, justify-start, items-start, and gap-6. Finally, we can render this car hub image right here by rendering the self-closing Next.js image tag and giving it a source equal to /logo.svg, same as in the navbar. The alt tag can be logo. Width is going to be 118 pixels. Height is going to be 18 pixels. And class name is going to be object-contain. If we now save this and go back, you can see the logo and the line right here. Below the image, we want to have a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to text-base and text-gray-700 to make the color a bit grayish. Finally, we can say something like car hub 2023, put a break tag right there, and then say all rights reserved, and then put the and sign, copy, semicolon. this is going to allow us to have that copyright sign right here. We want to go outside of this p tag and outside of the div and create a space for our footer links. So this is going to be a div tag with a class name equal to footer __ links. Inside of here, we want to map over all of these different sections, the about, company, and socials, as well as all the links within it. You never want to have this data within your JSX. You want to put it somewhere separate because this is considered business logic and not necessarily what's included in the application. So to simplify our life, so we don't have to type it all out, I've created a constants.ts file in the GitHub gist that is in the description down below. So go there and copy it, and then together we can create a new folder called constants. And then within the constants, you can create an index.ts file and paste what you just copied. I want to teach you how to do a proper application, not just put all of this content within the footer itself. So as you can see, this is nothing more than some manufacturers which we're going to use, the years of production, the fuels that exist, and finally the footer links, which are consisted of the title and then the actual links with the URLs. This way you can simply add a new one, delete one, and it's going to be reflected straight in the code. So with that said, we can go back to the footer and we can import those links by saying import footer links coming from add / constants. Then we can scroll down and we can map over them by saying footer links dot map. We're going to have each individual link, and then we can have an instant return by simply putting the parentheses. For each link, we're going to return a div, and that div is going to have a key equal to link.title. Then it's going to have a class name equal to footer __ link. Within that div, we want to render an h3, and that h3 is going to render the link.title. That's going to be the category we're rendering. So if you save it, you can see about, company, and socials. And let's make that bolded by giving it a class name equal to font-bold. Great. Now below it, we can do another map by saying link.links.map. And then in there, we're going to get each individual item, and then we can simply return a link element for it. That link has to have a key equal to item.title. It's also going to have an href property equal to item.url. And it's going to have a class name equal to text-gray-500. Finally, inside of there, we're going to say item.title. Now, if we save it, you'll be able to see that all the links show, and we have almost a finished footer. We just need the bottom part right here. Of course, it might look a bit weird like this, but if you expand it, you're going to notice that it nicely wraps to the width of our device. Finally, let's do that last part, which is that line and then privacy policy and terms and conditions. So to do that, we can go below this div with the footer links and then create one last div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, justify dash between, items dash center, flex dash wrap, mt10, border dash t, border dash gray dash 100. On small devices, padding horizontal 16, usually padding horizontal 6, and padding vertical of 10. Finally, within it, we can render a div, and that div is going to have a class name equal to footer __ copyrights dash link. And within it, we can simply render the link that's going to have an href equal to / and a class name equal to text-gray-500. And within it, we can simply say something like privacy policy. We can duplicate that link And then inside of it, we can say terms of use. If we save it, you can see that we have a structure that looks like this. And we're just missing the copyright on the bottom. So right here above our div containing those two links, we can create a p tag that's simply going to say at 2023 car hub, all rights reserved. And we can save it. There we go. Now this fits nicely. We have the all rights reserved and privacy policy in terms of use. And as you can see right here, the privacy policy in terms of use is getting connected to this. It seems like the justify between is not applied. And on the finish side, they're nicely put, one to the left and one to the right. It looks like we have to close this div that we had before on the top right here. So we only have two divs before the footer. We need to remove one and close it sooner. We have to close it after the footer links. So if we now save this, you can see everything is structured nicely because we have a div right here for the footer links, and that is together within this flex justify between, and then the last part is on its own on the bottom. With that said, if we now turn this out to be a full width application, we have a wonderful looking footer as well as a navigation bar, and finally we have the hero section. If we compare the two, they're going to be, I was about to say the same, but we definitely have some differences. So it looks like this shape is not appearing right on our side. It's getting a bit cut out. So let's go ahead and make sure that that shape is right, because that makes this button look so much better than here. So going back to our code to finalize the hero section, we can go to our components and then hero. And here we are using the self-closing div with the hero underscore image dash overlay. But I've made a mistake. This image should have been closed right here. So one div that's going to get closed is for this image, and then the div is right next to this div, not next to the image. If we fix that and expand it, you can see that now it is looking perfect. And with that said, we are ready to transition to the most important part of our application, which is the car catalog. It'll allow us to search through different models, as well as modify the fuel or the year of the car. And all of this is going to be server-side rendered. So let's get started by collapsing our browser, closing the hero section, and going all the way to our app page.tsx. We are done with the hero, and we're also done with everything in the layout, such as the navbar and the footer, and we are ready to continue with our homepage. Of course, the next part of the homepage, as we discussed, is going to be the car catalog. So, great job for coming this far into the video, and let's get started. To get started with the car catalog, below the hero, we can create a new div, which is going to act as a wrapper div for the catalog. So let's give it a class name equal to mt12 to divide it a bit from the top, and padding-x. Also padding-y. This is going to give it enough space for it to act as its own section. And we can give it a max width so it takes the full width of the screen. Finally, we can also give it an ID equal to discover, so once we click the above button, we can dive into this section. Great. Within this div, we can then create a new div that's going to have a class name equal to home__text-container. And this is going to be, of course, the container for the car catalog text. So right inside of here, we can simply create an h1 element, give it a class name of something like text-4XL and font-extra bold. And within it, we can say car catalog. If we save that and scroll down, you can see it right here. And below it, we can create a p tag, inside of which we can say explore the cars you might like. Okay, this is better already. And right below this div, we can focus on creating the filters. So we can create a new div that's going to have a class name equal to home__filters. Inside of there, we're going to render a couple of things. First of all, we want to render a self-closing search bar component. And below that, we're going to create a div. It's going to have a class name equal to home__filter dash container. And within it, we want to have two custom filter components. The first custom filter is going to have a title equal to fuel, and the second one is going to have a title of year. So now if we save this, of course, we're going to have a couple of errors because these components don't exist yet. So let's go ahead and get them created by creating a new component in the components folder called search bar.tsx, run hrjavascript inside of there, and we can repeat the procedure by creating the custom filter.tsx, and again run hrjavascript inside of there. Now, as we discussed, we can import and export them from our index.ts. So right here, we can do the search bar as well as the custom filter, and we can export both of them, search bar and custom filter. If we now save this and go back, we can now double click and then command or control click to automatically import it from components. If that didn't work for you, you can scroll all the way up and import it like this. Import custom filter and search bar from add/components. And you should be able to see a search bar and two custom filters, which fit nicely in the layout, same as we have it here. Search bar on the left, or in this case on the top, and then on the right side, we have two custom filters. This is looking great. Now, even though TypeScript is complaining a bit because we haven't yet specified the props to this custom filter component, no worries, we're going to do that later. Let's focus on the search bar first. So let's control click to go into the search bar and let's start implementing, first of all, its looks, and then soon enough, its functionalities. Right within the search bar, we can transform our search bar from a div at the start into a form element and give it a class name equal to search bar. We can also give it an onSubmit property, which is going to be equal to handle search. For now, we have to define that handle search above, so we can say const handle search is equal to, and just leave it as an empty callback function. We're going to get back to it soon. Now, as soon as you have an onSubmit, that is a browser event, so we need to transform this into a use client directive. There we go. This is working. And now within the form, we're going to have a div. And this div is going to have a class name equal to search bar __ item, like this. We're going to have two items in the search bar. The first one is going to be the manufacturer, and the second one is going to be the model. Even though they might appear to be the same, we have gone ahead and added extra functionalities to the manufacturer, where it's not just a search bar. It is something known as a combo box or an autocomplete search, where if we expand it, you can start typing the manufacturer and then you can select them based on the predefined array of manufacturers. So let's go ahead and implement that so-called combo box right away. To implement it, we're going to create a new reusable component, and we're going to call it search manufacturer. Of course, if we now save it, it's going to break because this component doesn't yet exist. And we can create it by creating a new component, search manufacturer .tsx, and we can run refce inside of there and finally export it within our index.ts. That's going to look something like this. Search manufacturer. There we go. And the error should go away if we export it and then import it properly in our search bar. It's going to be coming from import search manufacturer from /. it looks like it didn't pick up the import properly. An alternative is to just put it within the curly braces and then just get it from /, like this, because we have exported it from that component right here. And it's within the same folder. Now we'll be handling the state of which manufacturer is currently chosen. So in this case, we can import useState from React. Another reason that we need to use the useClient component because we're using hooks. And then immediately right here, we can say useState. We can call it manufacturer, set manufacturer, and at the start, it's going to be set to an empty string. And I'm going to expand this just a bit so we can see it more clearly. Now that we have the manufacturer and set manufacturer, we can pass those state as props to our search manufacturer like so. Of course, TypeScript is going to complain at first, but once we go to the search manufacturer and accept those props as we should, it's going to be fine. So right here, we want to accept the manufacturer as well as the set manufacturer. And we have to say that this is equal to search manufacturer props. And of course, we have to define the types for that. So alongside the export interface custom button, we can do export interface search manufacturer props. And of course, that's going to be just the manufacturer, which is going to be a string, and the set manufacturer, which is going to be a function that takes in manufacturer as a string and doesn't return anything. It's just a setter state. Now, with that said, we can here say search manufacturer props and import it from add./types like so. And with that, we can start creating this wonderful combo box. To create it, we'll be using Headless UI. Headless UI contains completely unstyled, fully accessible UI components designed to integrate beautifully with Tailwind CSS. And it gives you a couple of things that you can use, such as menu, list box, combo box or the autocomplete, which we're going to use, modals, and more. So let's look at the combo box or the autocomplete. It looks something like this. You have Wade Cooper, and then it allows you to start typing and then immediately see other people as well. So Headless UI is really great if you want to use some of the components that they offer out of the box. If I'm not mistaken, we'll be using the dialogue or the modal, as well as transitions for some animations, and we'll be using the autocomplete. So with that said, let's get started with implementing Headless UI autocomplete. First of all, we have to install Headless UI. And we can do that by stopping our application from running, and then running npm install add headless UI/React. Once it is installed, we can simply rerun npm run dev and be good to go. Then at the top, we can import the combo box as well as transition coming from add headless UI/React. Finally, we can start with the layout, and I'm going to collapse this just a bit so everything fits in the screen. We're going to give this div a class name equal to search-manufacturer. And inside of there, we're going to immediately render a combo box component. Within the combo box, we'll have a div, and that div is going to have a class name equal to relative and w-full. Now, if we save this and reload the page, because otherwise we won't be able to see the changes we make because we reloaded the application, now we get an error saying that you're importing a component that imports client only. It only works in client component, but none of its parents are marked with use clients, so they're components by default. Maybe you should try marking one of these as use client. So right in the search manufacturer, you can say use client. And if we reload it, it works, which means that we can proceed with creating our combo box. The combo box is going to be consisted of a couple of things. It's going to have a combo box button, like this one. Then it's going to have some kind of an input, and then finally another button to submit the search. So what we can do is first we can render the combo box dot button. We can also give it a class name equal to absolute top dash 14 pixels, not 140, just 14. Inside of there, we can render a self-closing Next.js image tag. It can have a source equal to /car-logo.svg. It can also have a width of 20, height of 20, a class name of margin left -4, and finally an alt tag equal to car logo. But as you can see, we haven't yet imported the image. So at the top, we can import image from next/image. And if we save that, we should now be able to see this Volkswagen button right here appear, which is great. That's going to be our placeholder, meaning that we can type in different car manufacturers or car makes, whatever you prefer. Next, we're going to have an input. So below the button, we can render the combo box.input. It's going to be a self-closing component that's going to have a class name, search-manufacturer__input. And a really cool thing about headless UI is that it's built on top of Tailwind, which means that you can simply provide a class name in Tailwind and it's going to work. We can also give it a placeholder. We can type something like Volkswagen, and this is looking good. And we can also give it a display value. This is something you have to provide to an input, and this is consisted of a callback function that gets the value and then displays the value. And since we're using TypeScript, we have to say that the value is of a type string right here. Finally, we're going to have an onChange, and in the onChange, we have to update the value. So let's go ahead and create a new state by first of all importing useState from React, and then we can create a new useState snippet by saying query and set query, and that's going to be an empty string at the start. That's going to be the search query. And on the onChange, we can simply say we get an event, and then we can set the query to be equal to e.target.value. So once we change the value in here, it's going to be changed. Now, right now, this is just a regular input, but we want to turn it into a combo box so that once you start typing, it actually gives you some predefined options. So to do that, below the combo box, we can create a new transition. That's going to just provide us some animations as well. And a transition has to portray itself as a specific element. And in this case, we don't want to add additional elements to the DOM, so we can simply import fragment from React, and we can say transition will act as a fragment, like so. Then on that transition, you can provide additional properties that are gonna animate it. So we can do something like leave is equal to transition, ease in, and duration 100. This is going to make sense soon. We're going to say leave from opacity 100 and leave to opacity 0. And then after leave, we have a function that's going to simply clear the query. Now within this transition, we can put some elements. And in this case, we're going to put the combo box dot options. Again, we're talking about these options right here. In our case, it's going to be different car makes. So before we go ahead and add some styles, let's first map over all of the options. It would have been simpler if I called these makes instead of manufacturers, but since we started calling it that way, let's stay consistent. Now, in this case, we want to filter out through the shown manufacturers. But we only want to show the ones that the user is searching for. So if we start typing something with an A, we don't want to show a BMW which starts with a B or doesn't even contain an A. So first of all, we have to get a list of all the manufacturers. and then filter it depending on the search query. Where are all the manufacturers? Well, we can import them by saying import manufacturers from add constants. If you remember correctly, I provided you with a list of all the manufacturers. And if you're wondering where I got this, I simply went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, give me a list of all car manufacturers. And thankfully, you have to make a check. They have to correspond with the API we're going to use soon. So in this case, we have the manufacturers, but we need to filter them out based on our query. So we can say const filtered manufacturers is equal to query is equal to an empty string. So if query is equal to an empty string, then we're going to return all manufacturers. But if it's not, if query exists, then we can do manufacturers dot filter. And then to a filter, you pass a specific item, and then you provide the conditions based off of which you want to filter it. So let me first indent this a bit more nicely so you can see what's happening. So we're first checking if we have a query. If we don't have a query, return all manufacturers, else return the manufacturers which we're going to filter in the following way. Here, we want to say item dot to lowercase dot replace. And in this case, we want to replace all the empty spaces. We can do that with a regular expression where we have s, which is an empty space, plus, and then g, global. And we want to replace all the empty spaces with an empty string. And then we want to check if the search query we have, or rather if the manufacturers we're filtering through include the query that we have, which we also lowercase, just to ensure that we're searching everything as lowercase. And then we also replace that query with the same regular expression. So we are removing empty spaces from the query, removing empty spaces from the manufacturer list, and we're ensuring that everything is in lowercase. Great. Again, we had to do some detailed extra work, but this is to ensure that whatever our users search, be that Volkswagen with a lowercase v or with an uppercase v, or even if they put some spaces before or after it, it's still going to work. So we always have to be careful of what people are searching for. Great. So now we have this, and we can, first of all, close this properly by giving it one more parenthesis. And then we can utilize the filter manufacturers to show some options. So within the combo box options, we can first show an empty option, meaning if we don't have any filter manufacturers. So we need to make a check for that by saying filtered manufacturers, and we're going to not do the dot map first, but rather we're going to check the length and check if the dot length is triple equal to 0 and if the query is not equal to an empty string, meaning if it exists. In that case, we want to show that empty option. So we can say and then show the combo box option like so. And it's going to have a value equal to query and a class name equal to search dash manufacturer underscore underscore option. And it's going to say something like create and dynamically query. So we want to let people know that they can search for something meaningful, like so. And this is the case right now because it doesn't exist. So if you search for AA, nothing's going to appear. So this is only going to be the case if we don't have anything. But if we do, so we don't want to use the end here. We want to turn this into a ternary at the end. So if we have nothing, then we show nothing. Otherwise, we're going to loop through all the possible options. So here we can say filter manufacturers dot map, where we're going to get each one of these items. And then for each item, we want to return something. Specifically, we want to return a combo box dot option. Since we're mapping over it, each option needs to have a key, which is going to be the item itself, and it needs to have a class name. Now, combo box option allows us to pass a function as a class name, where we can destructure the active tab. That's going to allow us to turn the options as a template string, so we can style the active option differently from the non-active option. All the options are going to be relative, and they're going to have a class of search manufacturer __ option. But for active ones, we can provide additional class name, such as bg-primary-blue and text-white. And for non-active ones, we can have a text-gray-900. There we go. So now if we save this, we're going to see that we have a couple of errors. First of all, we're missing one parenthesis right here to close the combo box. Secondly, our combo box option also needs a value, which is going to be the currently selected item or the manufacturer. And then within it, we want to show something. Maybe for now, we just want to show the item to show what it is. Now, if we save this, we're most likely going to have some more errors. And we do. It says right here that we have the unexpected token div at the search manufacturer, which is all the way at the top, which means that something is not properly closed. So in here, we're closing this, we're starting a new one, and then we have to properly close it at the end. There we go. Once we fix that, we can see that we have our search. And if I start typing A, thankfully you can see all of the options that include the letter A in them. If we start adding more letters, for example, we want to go for Audi, we can do AU and then only one option appears. So this is looking great. And now that I think about it, we don't even need this create because in our case, we cannot create anything. So the only thing we have to do is just filter through them. So if we do this, it's going to simplify our code significantly. And if we save it, it should still behave and work in a similar fashion. If we search for something that doesn't exist, it's not there, and else we get the options. Great. So of course, whenever you take some code out of somewhere, you have to know how to make it work and how to adapt it to your own needs. Great. Or we could have simply taken this, which is the final example from the code. And you can see it's quite similar to what we have. In this case, it might be cool also to show nothing found. That's going to be up to you. But in this case, we want to style our options just a bit differently to match our design. So right here, instead of simply rendering the item, we're going to show some different things. Let's do this. And now bear with me. See how they're doing it on the final website. Instead of simply rendering a div, they have this weird structure right here. Since this is a built-in component, they implemented some additional logic into it. So you can open a block, then open a function like so, and then right here, destructure the selected and the active. And that's going to allow you to know which one of these is currently selected or active. So within there, we can simply return a React fragment and then start rendering some code. So let's do that right away. Within this fragment, we can see what the combo box or the headless UI team did themselves, and we can copy their example all the way from the top span to the bottom where they close the fragment, and we can paste this code. Now, if we save it, you're going to see that we're going to have some errors, or at least I would hope we would. Maybe when we start typing. Yes, you can see their example is done using people. But in our case, our example is going to be using cars. So in this case, we're not going to do person.name. We're going to simply do an item because that's our car manufacturer. And we have a span right here at the bottom indicating which one is currently selected. We don't necessarily have to show an icon, just a span is enough. Now, if we save this and scroll down and start typing, you can see that we have some options, but we cannot really see what's happening inside of here. So let's look into that together. The reason why we cannot see anything is because we're never returning it. As you can see right here, I put a curly brace instead of a parenthesis. So right here, I'm gonna remove that and simply show a parenthesis at the end as well, which signifies an immediate return. And now we can see all the car brands. And if we select one, and we're going to know which one is currently selected. So this is looking great to me. Let's test it a few more times by starting to type something and selecting. Wonderful. With that, our combo box is getting much closer to being done. But of course, right now, it's not yet doing anything. It's just allowing us to browse through all of the cars in a really nice manner. But of course, we have to pass that data along somewhere to be able to search for it and make use of it. For that, the combo box accepts a couple of properties. It accepts a value, which is going to be equal to the manufacturer. And it accepts a onChange property, which is going to be set manufacturer. Now, if we save this and try it out one more time, there we go, Volkswagen is selected. And even though we cannot see anything, now we're selecting the value and the state within the search bar is getting updated, which is all that we need. That's going to allow us to later on actually filter through the cars data that we have. Wonderful. Now, it might not make sense to proceed creating the other part of the search if we don't have anything to filter yet. So what do you say that we immediately jump into fetching the data from the API, fetching all of these great cars, and then we'll have something to filter. So for now, we can close all of the currently open files and get started with fetching all of this great data from Rapid API. More specifically, we'll be using Cars by API Ninjas. It has only one endpoint, and within it, it allows us to do everything we want. So what you can do is you can click subscribe to test. It is completely free. It's going to lead you to this subscription page, and you can subscribe to the basic plan with 3,000 requests a month, which is going to be more than enough for our needs. There we go. Once you're subscribed, you can go back to endpoints and you can start exploring what properties can you pass to the API endpoint. We can filter out everything from the model to the make to the minimum city mileage per gallon, maximum city mileage per gallon, and we can do a lot of stuff right here. Cylinders, transmission, year, drive, fuel type, limit, and so much more. But for now, let's make a test endpoint to see how the data that's going to get returned looks like. It looks like each car has 12 different properties, and it looks like we're getting 5 cars per page. We can definitely modify that later on. That's just the default limit. So this is looking great to me. Now we can go back and we can actually make a request to this API based on the keys that Rapid API provided us. So simply click copy code right here, collapse the browser, and then create a new folder called utils in the root of your folder. This stands for utility functions. Within it, you can create a new index.ts file. And for now, simply paste what you copied right here. This is going to be everything that we need to make that request. And now that I look at it, we don't necessarily have to use Axios. We can simply use the good old fetch. There's nothing wrong with Axios. We just didn't install it in this case. So let's proceed with fetch. I'm going to override this. And now we have the good old fetch right here. Now we have the URL, we have the options and everything. Let's go ahead and create a function that we'll be able to use to make a call to that API. That's going to look something like this. Export async function fetch cars. For now, we can leave the params empty. Later on, we're going to pass some props to it. And inside of here, we can provide the headers for Rapid API. And the headers are within the options. So simply copy them. And right here, say const headers is equal to, and then paste the headers right here. That's going to be the X Rapid API key equal to this key right here, and then X Rapid API host equal to the URL of the API. Then we want to target a specific endpoint. You can see here we have the base URL. So let's go ahead and copy this URL, paste it right here, and we'll be able to slightly modify it. So we can say const response is equal to await fetch, and we want to fetch this specific URL. By default, it is a GET request. Now, we don't want to just fetch the main one where the cars is always set to Corolla. We want to be able to modify it. So for now, let's simply fetch all the cars, and then later on, we're going to pass additional properties. Of course, for this to work, we have to provide a second parameter to our fetch, which is going to contain the headers equal to headers. That's going to allow us to get this key in there as well. Now, of course, your key right here is going to be different because you copied it from your own Rapid API account. Finally, to parse the response as JSON, we can say const result is equal to await response.json, and then we can return the result, which are the actual cars. And we can delete all of the things that we copied before from Rapid API because now all of it is contained in this nicely packed fetch cars function, which is a so-called utility function because now we can reuse it across different files. First of all, let's go back all the way to app and then page.tsx. Inside of here, we want to make use of all of those cars. So what we can do is right on top below the home, we can say const all cars is equal to await fetch cars. We can import those fetch cars from add/utils. And believe it or not, Next.js allows you to put the page as asynchronous. So we can simply say export default async function home. And you can use the await right here. That's pretty cool, right? Now, let's see what do we get back from all cars by simply saying console log all cars. If we save it and go back to the browser and reload the page and inspect, open up the console and reload the page, are we going to see anything? Nope, nothing's there. What happens if we open up our terminal? We can see an error saying invalid parameters trying to call this API. So if we look at the API documentation, you can see that all of these fields are optional, but they do provide in that modal. So let's go back to our utils index.ts and let's provide a question mark modal is equal to Corolla, just to test it out and see if we get anything back. Again, nothing is going to be in the console right here, but the data is actually going to be inside of your built-in Visual Studio Code terminal. You can see all the different Toyota Corollas right here. Isn't that cool? Now you might be wondering why that is the case. Well, that's because every component and every page by default in Next.js is a server-side component. So this is actually being fetched on the server, which is why the console log is coming right here. If you converted this into the use client component, then it would be shown on the browser, but we don't want to do that if we don't have to. So we have all the cars, and now we can focus on showing them down below. So let's go ahead and do that right away, going below the search bar, going all the way below the home filters, and then creating some space for where we're gonna go over the cars. First, we have to check if all of the data is empty. And we can do that by saying const is data empty is equal to, if not, array dot is array all cars, meaning if it's not an array, or if all cars dot length is lower than 1, or if not all cars. So if any of these is true, that means that our data is indeed empty. So we can use that as a check down below. So if not is empty data, in that case, we can return a section. And here we can say we have cars. Else, we can return something else. And that's going to be a div. And this div is going to render an h2 that's going to say something like, oops, no results. And we can render the message that we get from the API by saying all cars question mark dot message. Now, even though we cannot see this right now, let's give it some class names. For example, home underscore underscore error dash container. And then to this h2, to make it a bit more stand out, we can give it a class name equal to text dash black, text dash XL, and font dash bold. Wonderful. Now, in this case, we do get we have cars because we saw those couple Toyota Corollas right here. So what do you say? Let's go ahead and show them all on the screen. So within this section, we're going to have an additional div right here. And that div is going to have a class name equal to home underscore underscore cars dash wrapper. Inside of there, we can simply put a dynamic block of code, say all cars question mark dot map, we get each individual car, and for each one, we return a car card component that looks like this. That car card is going to accept a car as a property, and let's just put it in a new line so we can more clearly see what is happening over here. It looks something like this. We have a section where we map over the cars, and then for each car, we show the car card component, and then we pass the car data to it. Hopefully, all of this is clear so far, but now you can notice that we have an error because the car card doesn't exist as of this moment. So what we can do is go to the components folder and create a new car card.tsx. We can run rafce. Once again, export it as all the other ones so far. So just rename it to car card. And if we do that, we can now import this car card on top right here from components. And if we save it and reload, you can see that we have 4 Toyota Corollas. Even though we don't know which ones those are, we can see it by the data. Now is our job to get into the car card and actually render the meaningful information about that specific card, such as the price per day, the name, whether it's all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, if it's automatic, and what is it miles per gallon. Great. So let's do it right away. Our car card is going to utilize the use state field to be able to manage the open state of the modal that's going to pop up. And therefore, by default, since we're using hooks, it's going to be a use client component. Alongside the use state, we're going to also import the image coming from next/image. Now, we already know that we're passing the car into our car card, so we can accept it as props. But since we're using TypeScript, we also have to specify the type. So we can go all the way to our types folder, and inside of here, we can create an interface for the car props. Something like export interface, and then car props will do the trick. Of course, how do we know which props does our car have? Well, we can go straight to the API documentation and check out the demo of the results right here and simply copy all the properties. And we can paste them right here. Now, of course, we have to add commas. So right now I'm holding the Alt key and clicking with my mouse, and that's going to allow me to simply add semicolons at the end of all of these lines at once. And instead of the actual value that we have to specify the type of the value. So the city mile per gallon is going to be a number. Then we're going to have the string, of course. Then we're going to have a number. And we can repeat this process where I can immediately select all the numbers, holding the Alt key, and put that out as number. And we can repeat the procedure with all the strings as well. And that's going to look something like this. And we immediately have our car interface. That's going to be of so much help because we'll never be able to miss a specific property. For example, if we start typing city, MPG for miles per gallon, it's going to say, hey, that property doesn't exist. You only have this one. Great. Now we can go back in here and we can utilize those props. We can create a new interface, which is going to be called car card props, where the car is going to be equal to car props, like this. And the only thing we have to do is now say car is car card props. And we're just missing the car props, which we can import from add/types. Great. Later on, we'll also be using our custom button, which is going to come from /custom button. And with that, we are ready to start creating the main structure of our car. So immediately right here below, we can destructure the main car's properties. That's going to be city, MPG, year, make, model, transmission, and drive. And that's going to be equal to the car. That's going to allow us to simply say year instead of car.year. Now we can see that it's complaining that the year doesn't exist on a car. And that points my attention to this missing property, which I unfortunately missed. So I'm going to add the year at the bottom as well and turn it into a number. And with that, we are good to proceed. So our car card is going to be a div that's going to have a class name equal to car-card group. And we can go back to our app and you can see that this is going to give us a nice looking element or a div for our card. Immediately within it, we can create a new div that's going to have a class name equal to car-card __ content. Immediately inside of there, we can create a new h2, and this one is going to say make, and then it's going to say model. That's going to give us the full car name, let's call it that way. And we can see that all of these are Toyota Corollas. And let's give it a class name of car-card __ content -title. This is going to make it look just a bit better. Finally, we can dive below this div and create a new p tag. That p tag is going to have a span element that's going to render the car rent. That's interesting. So later on, we could convert this application in a car renting app. Right now, we don't have the information about how much each car costs. So we're going to play around a bit and try to calculate the price of the rent of the car based on the year or the mileage. So if we go back to our folder called utils, we can create a new utility function. And that's going to be export const calculate car rent. As you can see, I simply pasted it here, and you will be able to do the same by simply copying it from the GitHub gist down below. This is nothing more than just setting up an imaginary rental price per your car based on the base price, mileage factor, age factor. We calculate it, and then we come up with a specific price. You could have used ChatGPT to create a similar function as well. That's going to allow us to export this function and go back and then utilize it right here, where we can say const car rent is equal to calculate car rent, and we can pass in city MPG and year. And of course, don't forget to import calculate car rent from utils. And now we can show the car rent right here within the span element. That's going to be 54 for most Toyotas, funny enough. What we can do is style it a bit. So we can do something like on this p tag, give it a class name equal to flex, margin top of 6. Text is going to be 32 pixels, and font is going to be extra bold. Now to this span, we can give it a class name equal to self-start. This is going to align self on the start, text -14 pixels, and font semi-bold. And finally, we can duplicate this span below. This time, instead of car rent, we can say / per day. And then instead of self-start, we can do self-end, and we can do font -medium. And this is going to show the price per day. Now, I noticed I made a mistake right here. The car rent should have been in between those two spans, and the dollar sign should have been in the first span. So we have a dollar sign here, car rent in the middle, and then the span with the day right here, which gives us something that looks like this. So it's going to be dollar price per day. There we go. Looking great. Now below that, we want to show our image. So that's going to be below the p tag, but the image is going to come from another source. So what we can do for now is simply do a wrapper for that image. And now we can focus on showing the image. The image is going to come from another API. So for now, we can just do the wrapper for that image and a demo image for all cars, and then we're going to fill in the details later on. So in here, we can give it a class name of relative, w-full, h-40, margin y3, and object-contain. That's a wrapper for the image. And then we can render the self-closing image in there. And for now, for the source, we can put the /. Let's go into the public just to see what's there. And then we could do the hero PNG. I think that's a car. So we can do just source / hero. And let's give it a width of something like 50 and height of 50, just to see how that's going to look like for now. We can also give it an alt tag equal to car model. We can give it a fill and a priority, meaning that it's going to load first, and a class name object-contain. If we have fill, I don't think we need the width and the height. So if we save this, we have this great looking demo car model for now for all of these Toyota Corollas. As I said, car images are coming from another API. So once we fully finalize the car and the search, we'll be able to add real images. Now let's go to the div below to create all the additional information, such as the automatic, all-wheel drive, and miles per gallon. For that, we can give this div a class name equal to relative, flex, w-full, and margin top of 2 to divide it a bit from the image. We're going to have one more div inside of it that's going to have a class name equal to flex. And then on group-hover, we're going to make this completely invisible. Yep, that's a property. Visibility is going to be hidden. This is going to allow us to show the button instead. Then we're going to do w-full and justify dash between, as well as text dash gray. And inside of there, we can have a final wrapper div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, flex dash call, justify dash center, items dash center, and gap dash 2. Inside of there, we can show the steering wheel image by rendering a Next.js image tag with a source equal to / steering dash wheel.svg. We can give it a width of just 20 pixels, as well as a height of 20, and the alt tag equal to steering wheel. And below it, we can render a p tag, and this p tag is going to have a class name equal to text dash 14 pixels. And we can check the transmission. So if the transmission is equal to A, then we can show automatic, else we can show manual. If we now save this, you can see this great looking steering wheel and it says automatic. Now, if we duplicate this 2 more times, we'll be able to have 2 more icons. The second one is going to have the tire image, so tire.svg. It can also say tire here, and it's simply going to render, instead of a p tag, drive.to uppercase like this. If we save it, you can see FWD for drive. And the last one is going to be a gas SVG, and that's going to render the city_mpg MPG. So that's going to be how many miles per gallon it spends in a city. Great. And we have our great looking car card. Now, if we go down one div and then one more div, we can focus on creating that button that's going to show up. So we can create a div for the button. It's going to have a class name equal to car-card _ btn dash container. And within it, we can render our own custom button component. That custom button is going to have a title equal to view more. It's going to have container styles equal to w-full, padding y of 16 pixels, rounded -full, and bg-primary-blue. If we now save this and hover, you can see it looks good, but we also have to change the text styles. So let's do text styles. And that's going to be equal to text-white, text-14 pixels, leading-17 pixels, and font-bold. Now you can see that TypeScript is already complaining because so far we haven't used text styles, and it's going to complain even more because we want to give it a right icon. So something like right-arrow.svg, as it is right here. We haven't made that happen yet on a reusable button, but that's what reusable components are for. You can style them depending on the context where they show. And finally, we're going to have a handle click that's going to open up the modal. So we can say set is open is set to true, which we don't yet have. So at the top, we can create a new use state snippet that's going to say is open, set is open, at the start set to false. Of course, indicating the modal state. Great. Now let's dive into our custom button. And let's first change the custom button props. Right now, we obviously don't have the text styles. So at the bottom, let's add text styles. Specify that it is optional and make it a string. We also have the right icon, which is going to be optional and also a string. Later on, we're going to have the is disabled property, which sometimes can be true. So that's going to be a Boolean. And now we can go back to our custom button, accept these additional properties, such as text styles and right icon, and we can utilize them. The text styles are going to happen here next to flex 1, where we can simply render the text styles. If we save that, you can see the text is now white. And the last remaining thing to do regarding this button is to add an arrow. So right below the span, we can open a new dynamic block of code and say if right icon exists, then render a div that's going to contain a class name of relative width or w-6, h-6, and we can render a self-closing image. That image is going to have a source equal to right icon, an alt tag equal to right icon, a fill, and a class name equal to object-contain. If we save that, you can see it appear right here. This is looking great. And of course, if we click it, nothing happens yet, but soon enough, we're going to show a modal that's going to give us more information about this specific car. So if we go back from the custom button and the types and the calculate car rent back into our car card, the last thing to do is to showcase .car modal. So right below this div with a custom button and below one more div, meaning right here near the end, we want to create a car details component. And if we save it now, of course, it's going to break. But that means that now is time to create a new component. So right click, new file, and let's call it car details.tsx. We can run RAFCE, export it as we usually do. That's going to be car details. and go back and import it at the top. Right here, you can do car details from /car details. And we have to pass a couple props to it. We have to know, are the car details going to show or not? Which means that we have to pass the isOpen state equal to isOpen. And we need to be able to modify that state, meaning close the modal. So we can pass the close modal function that's going to have a call to set isOpen is set to false. It's going to toggle it off. And then, of course, we want to pass the car is equal to car. So we pass over all of the details about a car to car details. Now, as you can see, the car details currently complains because it's not accepting those props. So let's control click the car details, accept all of those props properly, and let TypeScript know that it has nothing to worry about. So what we can do is create a new interface right within here, car details props. And what do we need? We need the isOpen state, which is going to be a Boolean. We need a close modal, which is going to be just a function that's not going to return anything. And check this out. We can use another interface we created before. Car is going to be equal to car props, which are coming from our add types. Isn't that cool? We are reusing all of the car properties within another interface and then adding two additional things. TypeScript really is extensible. And now we can simply accept them. isOpen, close modal, and car. That's going to be of a type car details props. Wonderful. And with that, we are ready to start creating a modal that's going to look like this. If you pay really close attention, you're going to notice that it doesn't open instantly. There's a transition that happens. It takes about a couple hundred milliseconds and then it opens. So we're going to achieve that transition using the headless UI transition property. So let's get started with creating this phenomenal modal. We can start by importing the image tag, which we've used many times so far, from Next/image. Next, we're going to need to import a fragment coming from React. We're going to also need to import a couple of things from the headless UI, for example, a dialog and a transition from headless UI/React, and don't forget to put the @ up front. Now, the transition is to add that animation, and the dialog is the modal that you can see that opens when you click on View More. And with that, we can start creating the structure of our car details, car modal, dialog, however you want to call it. So first, let's wrap everything in a React fragment. Then we're going to create a new transition. This transition is going to have a tag of appear, meaning it's going to show up. And then on show, we want it to show when it is open, once we open the modal, and it's going to act as a fragment. Here we go. Now, within that transition, we want to open up a dialog. That dialog is going to show as a div, and it's going to have a class name equal to relative z10 to appear on top of things, and it's going to have an onClose property, which is going to be equal to close modal function, which we're passing to car details. Within that modal, we're going to have something known as a transition.child. And this is going to be the backdrop. So within the transition child, we can render the self-closing div that's going to have a class name equal to fixed, inset 0, bg black, and bg-opacity-25. If we save this, you're going to see that it's going to complain because it wants you to transition this over to the use client, because headless UI uses use client. So if we fix this, you can see that now it works and you have this backdrop visible. Of course, on top of the backdrop, we want to show some other things. But first, we want to make this backdrop appear slowly. So to this transition.child, we're going to add some properties. It's going to be as a fragment, and when it enters, it's going to enter with an ease out, duration 300. It's going to enter from opacity 0 and enter to opacity 100. When it leaves, it's going to leave with the ease in and duration 200. It's going to leave from opacity 100 to opacity 0. I really love the way how they put the starting and the ending position, and you can do that for each and every property. So now if we reload the page and you click view more, you can notice how it slowly appears, and you can close it with the escape key on your keyboard. Now, of course, we don't want to just have the backdrop. Below the transition.child, we want to create a real dialog modal. So right here, we can give it a class name set to fixed, inset 0, overflow, -y-auto. And inside of it, we want to create a new wrapper div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, min-h-full, items-center to center them vertically, justify-center to center horizontally, p-4 for padding, and text-center. Inside of there, we want to render another transition.child. As a matter of fact, we can copy the one we had above. So you just have to close it again. It's going to be a fragment, ease out, duration, opacity, but alongside opacity, we also want to change the scale from 95 to 100. This is going to make it appear like the dialog is expanding while it opens. If you pay close attention to the finish side, you'll see how it expands from 95 to 100. It's barely noticeable, but it is there. And then we want to remove the scale from 100 back over to scale 95. There we go. And within it, we want to have something known as a dialog panel. So let's create a new component, dialog.panel. This dialog panel is going to have a button within it, and this button is going to have a type equal to button. It's going to have an on-click equal to close modal, and it's going to render the image that's going to have a source equal to /close.svg, an alt tag equal to close, a width equal to 20, a height equal to 20, and a class name equal to object-contain. If we save this and open up the modal, we can see an X appear right here. It's hard to notice it. That's because we don't yet have the actual modal card. But let's create it. So we can style, first of all, this dialog.panel by giving it a class name equal to relative, w-full, max-w-lg, max-height, or h-90vh. So we never wanted to take the full height of the screen, only 90%. Overflow-y-auto, transform, rounded-2xl, and then BG white. Now, if we save this, we cannot see anything yet, but if we reopen it, you can see some kind of a modal. Now, let's give it a text-left, shadow-xl, transition-all, flex-call, and gap-5. If we save this and reopen it, again, nothing really happens, but soon enough, as we start adding all of the elements, it's going to start making more sense. For now, let's style the button a bit by giving it a class name equal to absolute, top-2, right-2, z-10, w-fit, p-2, bg-primary-blue-100, and rounded-full. This is going to make it look like this, although now everything disappears, so we cannot see anything. We're going to look into this as soon as we add some more stuff to our dialog panel. So going below this button, we want to create the div that's going to serve as the actual content of the final card. And to that wrapper div, we can give a class name equal to flex-1, flex, flex-call, and gap-3. Inside of there, we can have a wrapper for the image. So it's going to have a class name equal to relative, w-full, h-40, bg pattern, bg cover, bg center, and rounded-lg. If we now save this, we can finally see something because now it's taking a height of 40, which is 10 rem or 160 pixels. So the card got some height and therefore it is visible. We can also see the close button, which fully works, and it slowly animates in. Now, for now, inside of here, we can render the same demo car image as we did before. So let's scroll all the way up in the car card and let's copy this image right here and go back to car details and paste it within that div. This is going to render the car as you can see here. Now we can go below this div with the BG pattern, still staying in the other div that we have created. And we're going to create a div for 3 smaller images down below. So right here, we can give it a class name equal to flex and gap-3. And we can create a div for one of these 3 images. It's going to have a class name equal to flex-1. And immediately we can just copy the image that we have right here and paste it. You should be able to see 2 of these images appear really soon. Not yet though. Alongside flex1, we also want to give it relative, w-full, h-24, bg-primary-blue-100, and rounded-lg. Now you can see the other car. It's taking the full width because it has flex1. But now if we duplicate this div 2 more times, we should have 2 additional images right here. Of course, now it's all the same car, but soon enough, we're going to be able to show different images from different positions of every single car brand and type. Wonderful. So what we can do right now is go all the way down, 1, 2, 3 divs down, still staying within dialog panel, because now we can focus on adding the additional content right here. First, we want to show the name and the brand. So right here, let's create a div. It's going to have a class name equal to flex-1, flex, flex-call, and gap-2. We're just making some space and ensuring that the elements are going to show one below another. Then we want to create an h2 element, and within it, we want to render the car.make as well as a car.modal. And you can see Toyota Corolla right here. And finally, we can change the class name equal to font-semi-bold, text-XL, and capitalize. This is going to make it look just a bit better. Now, below this H2, we can start adding all of the other content. And you might think it's going to be a real pain in the ass to add every single little line, but of course, we're going to map over it. So let's first create a container that's going to have a class name equal to margin top 3 to divide it a bit from the title, flex, flex-wrap, and gap-4. And within it, we need to wrap over all of the car properties. Now, the way in which we're going to do that is going to be really interesting. We know that we have our car, right? And if we look into the car type, the car is going to have all of these properties. It's going to have class, combination, cylinders, displacement, drive, and so on. And we have a specific value corresponding to each one of these so-called keys. So a car is going to be an object with keys and values. And this is one of the rare occasions where we don't simply want to show the values, but rather we also want to show the keys. Now, how do you get the keys of an object? Do you know that? This is a plain JavaScript question. So really try to put some thought into it and think about how can you get the keys of an object. Usually you need values. Well, you do it using the object.entries. You pass in an object to the object.entries, and that returns you an array of key and value pairs or properties of an object. Then we can do a .map, and then we can get, if we do array destructuring right here, the key as well as the value. And then we can instantly return a div for each one of these key value pairs. And that looks like this. That div is going to have a class name equal to flex, justify dash between because we want to show the key on the left side and the value on the right side, gap dash 5 to give it some space, w dash full, and text dash right. Finally, the key is going to be the key. Then inside of that div, we can render an h4, and here we can just render the key. And below that, we're going to render a p tag where we can render the value. And as soon as we save that, you can see all of the properties appear immediately. Now let's make this look just a bit better. First of all, to our h4, we can give it a class name equal to text-gray because it's not as important as the value, of course. And then we can capitalize it. Again, a really cool property from Tailwind right here, text transform, capitalize. We can also remove the underscores right here. So what we can do is say key.split by the underscore and then .join with a space. It's a little detail, but it makes a big difference. Finally, let's give this p a class name equal to text-black-100 and font-semi-bold to make it stand out a bit more. Now you can see that we don't have enough padding on this card. So if we go all the way up where we declare the initial dialog panel, it looks like we missed some padding right here. So let's see where is it missing from. It looks like a couple of things are wrong right here. So we have the overflow y auto, then we have transform, rounded-2xl, bg white, and then we can also add a p-6, a padding of 6. If we save that and click again, this is going to look like a completely different card. Then it's text-left, but I also missed a shadow. It's going to be a shadow XL, not XSL. So if I fix it, if we reopen it, it's going to have a small shadow on the bottom, making it appear like it floats on top of the screen. And I think everything else is good. Now we have a wonderful looking car details page, or in this case, just a modal or a dialogue, however you want to call it. But that's good. We can open it. We can also go for the Toyota Corolla wagon, and that's looking great as well. We just have a bit more information about the details of the car. Now, we've been staring at these Toyota Corollas this whole time. Well, at least the title says it's a Toyota Corolla. So let's just go to our API a bit, which is in utils, and let's try to go for something a bit more interesting. So if we go to fetch cars, let's try to change it to a modal, and let's see if they have some Carreras. That might be a bit more interesting. So that's going to be a Porsche. And there we go. We can see some different models right here, 911 Carrera, and we have a couple of different variations of them. Yeah, this is the all-wheel drive, as you can see, and the top one is the rear-wheel drive. But still, now I'm assuming that the images of these Porsches would look a bit different than they look right now. So I think now is the perfect time to tap into the second API of the day and properly get it to show the front side as well as all the other sides of our vehicle. So to do that, we can now close the car details, close the car card and the page as well, and then go to utils. This is where we're going to tap into that second API in the same way that we tapped into the first one. So we can collapse these functions and create a new one called export const generate car image URL. and it's going to accept a car, which is going to be of a car props right here. And later on, we're going to also pass it an angle because we can angle those images. So that's going to be an optional property of a type string. And of course, we're going to open up a function block. And we have to import our types into our utils index.ts. Great. Now let's set up the call to our second API. To start using this API, you can go to IMAGIN.studio /car-image-API. And when I say they have a lot of cars, I really do mean it. I mean every single make and every model family for that make in all the different colors. So this is pretty crazy. It is a paid API, but you can sign up for their free trial by clicking the Get Access Now. You need to enter your company email address and then you will get additional instructions. So feel free to use your company email address to get a free trial. Once you do get the key, feel free to store it right here as a comment because we're going to use it later on. And if something goes wrong with getting this key, I'm going to show you how I got mine. So right here, first we need to specify the API endpoint. That's going to be const URL is equal to new URL, and we're going to pass a string of https://cdn.imagine, that's going to be imagine without the E, .studio/get image. And it's going to be studio with an O here. Now, if you control click it, you can see that for now, it gives you an empty modal because it doesn't know which model or make or model family are you looking for. So now we can append additional information to this API to be able to get the data. First of all, we're going to destructure the make, the year, and the model from the car that we're going to pass to this function. And then we can say URL.search_params.append. And we need to append a customer, which is going to be equal to your key right here. So if you manage to get a key with a company email, feel free to put it here. In case you didn't, I'm going to show you mine. It's going to be hrjavascript-mastery. And now you're going to have the key. And keep in mind that by the time that you're watching this video, it is possible that this key gets expired. So I'm going to leave the entire generate car image URL with the always updated key in the GitHub gist down below. So simply visit it and you can copy this entire function. Now we're going to pass some additional properties such as URL, search params, .append, and we can append a make. And a make is coming from our car model. And now we can duplicate this many different times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After the make, we can provide a model family. And we can do that by getting the model.split. We're going to split it with one space and get the first element out of it. That's going to look something like this. After that, we want to get the zoom type. It's going to be set to full screen. We want to get the model year like this, which is going to be set to, it has to be a string of year. And finally, we want to get the angle of the car, which is going to be a dynamic angle property, and it has to be within a string as well. Finally, once we form that URL, we simply want to return it as a string like so. Great. Now we can call this generate car image and see what kind of URL it will spit out. So let's go to our, first of all, app, and then the page, and then car card. In the car card, this is the first time we're using that demo hero image, but this time we want to utilize a real one. So we can see those great Porsche 911s. Inside of the image, we can call a generate car image URL as a function. And of course, you have to import it coming from add/utils. Once you do, you have to pass one property to it, a car. That's it. And if you save it, and we get an error. That's because the hostname cdn.IMAGIN.studio is not configured under our images in next.config.js. So let's go to our next.config.js. And inside of here, we can add images object, and we can specify domains as an array where we're going to say cdn.imagine.studio. And if we save that, we might need to reload our application because we changed the next.config.js. And once it reloads, hopefully it's going to work. Okay, the moment of truth, we're going to scroll down, and there we go. Beautiful car images appear right away. This is looking great. Now, if we open it up, we again have our demo images. So now we can go into our car details, and there, instead of calling the same old hero image, we can again call our new function, which is going to be right here. But as a matter of fact, we can just select the entire string of hero.png, and we can open a Control F or Command F if you're in Mac, and then press this arrow and then say, curly braces, generate car image URL. We pass in a car, and then we're going to pass the angle, which is going to be the second string. That's going to be right here. Now, if we save this, you can see how it's going to change it. Oops, I'm going to go back because we forgot the second curly brace to close it, and click this right here. And there we go. Now, it's not going to be the URL. It's going to rather be the car as the first parameter. So I'm going to fix this in all cases. There we go. And we have to, of course, import this function from add/utils. Now, if we save this, you're going to see that we have cars. It's looking great, but we want to pass the angle for these different ones. So for the first one, we don't have to pass an angle at all. For the second one, we want to pass an angle of 29. Then we want to do 33. And finally, we want to do 13. I found these angles to work the best. If you save it, you're going to see a car from completely different positions, and it truly is looking wonderful, and it makes a big difference in this application. Again, all of these are the same, but once you have a variety of different cars, it's really going to make your app feel more polished because these are professional images. Just to see if the images are working fully, we can go back to our utils. And then inside of there, we can change the modal since we don't have the search implemented yet. We're going to have that soon. For now, we can do it manually within the API call. Let's do something from Audi like a Q3. If we save this, you can see Audi Q3 Quattro, and the images haven't changed, but they did now. So we just needed to wait for a second or needed to reload, and now it's looking good. And we can see the images appear from all sides. This is looking great. Now that we're properly fetching the cars and that we have the images and the details for the cars and everything else, we are ready to go back, we could put it that way, to our search. So if you remember, we have a search bar here, which works to change the manufacturer, but our search is currently not doing anything. So once we update the search, we want to update which cars are we showing by making another fetch to our Rapid API. So let's do that next. And then we're going to focus on adding the modal filtering as well, right here. And finally, the filters for the fuel and the year to make it even more precise. And of course, we're diving into the server-side rendering here, so we're going to see how that works. Wonderful. With that said, let's go back to finalize the search now that we have all of these wonderful cars. The only thing we have implemented within our search bar right now is this search manufacturer component, but we also need some kind of a button to submit that search. So let's create a reusable search button self-closing component. And in this case, this component is going to be reusable only for the search bar file. So we don't necessarily have to put it within the components folder. Rather, we can declare it right here above by saying const search button is equal to just a immediate return arrow function. Inside of there, we can create a button, and that button is going to be of a type is equal to submit because we want to submit our search form. And we can pass some class names. We're going to make this dynamic by creating it as a template string, give it a minus ml-3, meaning it's going to jump into the input just a bit, and a z index of 10. And later on, we'll have to provide some additional classes depending on where we're calling the search button from. So we can pass the other classes as well, which can be a prop right here, other classes. So right here in the search button, in this case, we can create a prop called other classes. And here we're going to put it on small devices. It's going to be hidden. This is for the initial search button. Great. And now, of course, since we're working with TypeScript, we have to say that the other classes are going to be of a type. Other classes is a string right here. There we go. This is great. And now within the button, we're going to have an image where the source is going to be /magnifying-glass.svg. The alt tag is going to be magnifying glass. Width is going to be 40. Height is going to be 40. And class name is going to be object-contain. And of course, we have to import the image coming from next image. So just import it right here. And if you save this, we should be able to see something, but no, it's not there yet. The search button. It could be because we're in the small window. So if we expand it, no, nothing appears right here, although it should be there. So let's go back and let's see where our search button is. We have the search manufacturer, we have the search button, we pass other classes, and then we show it right here. If we check the finish site, we see that we don't even have it right here at the end. But if we expand, then it's still at the end of here. So yeah, it's going to be after the modal, not necessarily immediately after the search. So this is looking good for now. Now, below our search button and below our div, we're going to create another div. And this div is going to have a class name equal to search bar __ item, as we had it above, but this is going to be for the second input. So inside of here, this one is going to be just a bit simpler. We can render the image. This image is going to have a source equal to modal-icon.png. It's going to have a width of 25, a height of 25, and a class name equal to absolute w-20 pixels, as well as a height of 20 pixels, and a margin left of 4, as well as the alt tag equal to car model. If we save this, now we have this second icon right there, and we can create a new input tag right below. That input is going to be of a type is equal to text. It's going to have a name equal to model, a value equal to model, and this is something that we haven't yet created. It's going to be within a state. So alongside the manufacturer state, we'll have to keep track of the model state as well. At the start, set as an empty string. Now, of course, we need to be able to change that model as well. So it's going to have an onChange property where we get the event, and then we call the setModel e.target.value. It's going to have a placeholder, and since we had a Volkswagen right here as the make, we can do something like Tiguan for the model, which is the model, and then the class name is going to be search bar __ input. If we now save this, we can see that now we have a complete make and model search, and we can also now reuse this search button right here, and to it we can pass the other classes equal to sm hidden, like so. So we can see it on medium devices, but just below, we're going to duplicate it one more time below this div. And here we're going to say max SM hidden. So we're going to show them in different places depending on where we have them. And it looks like I misspelled the hidden here. So if I fix it, we should only have one. And if I expand, this is looking good. If I bring it to mobile size, now we have one for each, exactly how it should be. Wonderful. We can bring it back to this size and we can try to make this actually work, right? That's the whole goal. Well, to do it, you might think that we'll have to make a new API call from the search bar whenever something changes, but that's not going to be the case. The only thing that we are going to do is we're going to change the URL parameters on top to something like make is equal to, let's do Volkswagen, and then the model is equal to the Tiguan. That is great because then Next.js is going to make a server-side call for us and get the data to us. The only thing we have to do is change the parameters. So to be able to do that, we're going to jump into the handle search function. Here, as a parameter, we get an event, which is of a type react.form event and HTML form element. Specifically, we have to do it like this, and we have to make sure that we have React imported at the top. Now, inside of this function, first we want to do e.prevent default, because the default behavior of the browser is to refresh once we submit the form, but we're working with React and Next.js, so we don't want to do that. Now, in case we don't have the manufacturer or the model, we want to throw some kind of an error. So we can say if manufacturer is equal to an empty string or a model is equal to an empty string, we can return maybe some kind of an alert that's going to say, please fill in the search bar. So now if we click, we get an alert. But if we actually have some data, then we need to update the URL bar to look something like this. And to do that, I'm going to create a new function called const update search params. It's going to take two params, the model, which is a string, and a manufacturer, which is also a string. And then we have to form the new URL and how that's going to look like. So first, we can say const search params is equal to new URL search params, and we pass the current window.location.search. So if there was something else before, we need to know it and store it right here. Then we want to update it or delete it. If we have a model we want to check out, then we can do the search params.set model and model. If we don't have a model, we simply want to delete the previous model that was there. And we can repeat this with the manufacturer. So if we paste it below, just replace every model to manufacturer. There we go. Finally, once we got the new search params, we can say const new path name is equal to a template string of window.location.path name, then a question mark, and then what do we add to it? Search params dot to string. So you can see what we're doing here. We're taking the current path name, appending all of these search params to it, and coming to the final path name or the final URL. And then we can do a router.push, and we can push the new path name. Of course, this router is undefined because it's coming from Next.js. So at the top, we can say import use router coming from Next navigation. And then we need to call it as a hook. Const router is equal to use router, like so. And now, if we save it, we will be able to click search and it should append specific properties on top. So let's go ahead and give it a shot by saying something like Audi. And then what do we have? we have maybe a Q5. So let's press search. Nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? Because we're never calling the update search params. So we can call it once we handle the search right here by saying update search params, and we're going to pass in modal, but we want to make sure that it is 2 lowercase and manufacturer also 2 lowercase, just to ensure we don't have any inconsistencies. So to this function, we pass a modal 2 lowercase, manufacturer 2 lowercase, and it will end up looking something like this. If we now save it and press search one more time, as you can see, it updated the modal to Q5 and the manufacturer to Audi. And the next step I'm going to show you is how, as soon as you update the params, Next.js is going to automatically refetch the data. To do that, we have to go all the way back to our page.tsx where we're fetching the cars in the first place. So what we can do is we can try to get all the data from search params. How does that look like? Well, in Next.js, you can immediately extract all the search params straight from props of a specific page right here. And then in the fetch cars, we can pass all of the options by saying object, where we can pass the manufacturer, which is equal to search params.manufacturer. We can pass the year, which is equal to search params.year. We can pass the fuel equal to search params.fuel. We can also pass the limit equal to search params.limit and a modal equal to search params.modal. Now, in case we don't have any search params, we can also provide default values for all of these. So we can say, or it's going to be an empty string, or for properties like year, we can do something like 2022. And for limit, we can do 10. This is how many cars are we going to see at the start. Now, if we save this, you're going to see that we have an error or a warning from TypeScript saying that fetch cars didn't accept any properties or didn't expect any params. And that is true, because if you check it out right here, you can see that it's not expecting any. So TypeScript really saves us right here saying that, hey, expected 0 arguments, but got 1. What are you doing with this? Well, what we can do next is go into our utils and modify the fetch cars so that it accepts filters. And filters is going to be equal to filter props. So this is something that we have to create in the types. So going all the way to our types, we can create the filter props by saying export interface filter props. And we're going to pass exactly what we had before in our page. We can copy all of these properties, paste them here, and instead of passing all of the search params, we just have to provide their type. In most cases, it's going to be a string, but we also have 2 numbers. A year is going to be a number, and a limit is going to be a number as well. So now we have the filter props. If we go back to the utils, we can now import the filter props from types, and now our fetch cars knows what it is expecting, and it's no longer complaining. So now we can actually utilize this function to fetch the right cars. How are we going to do that? Well, we can append it all to this response. You can use something similar to what we did with this approach. I think this is a bit cleaner, but an alternative is just to turn this into a template string, and then you can pass all the parameters you want. For example, cars, and then you pass a make, which is going to be equal to manufacturer. And then you pass a make, which is going to come from filters, which we need to destructure at the top. So we can say something like const manufacturer. Let's also get the year, the model, the limit, the fuel, which is coming from, or rather is equal to, filters. And now right here, we can just use it. We can say make is equal to manufacturer. Let's keep going. We can say and year is equal to year. And model is equal to model that we're going to pass in. and limit is equal to limit. And finally, and fuel type is equal to fuel. Again, make sure to use the underscore for the fuel type. Now our API is going to respond to whatever we put into the search, and immediately you can see it worked. We can try with some other make. For example, let's do BMW, and let's go with something like M8. If we now search, it scrolls all the way to the top, but you can see the parameters have changed. But if you scroll down, you can see the BMW competition, and you can see that all the images and everything else is working as well. Wonderful. With that, all of this is being done on the server side. We are just changing the search parameters, and Next.js is refetching it immediately by taking those search params and making a call. Now, you might have noticed that when you search for a specific brand or make, the website scrolls all the way to the top, which breaks the app's usability. Now, with all of the latest and greatest technologies, you cannot always win. You get some, you lose some. And that's how real web development is. I wanted to include this part in here to show you that this is not a bug in our application. It is a bug in the new Next.js 13.4, and there's already an issue on GitHub open for it. I'm going to expand this just so you can see. On the official Vercel Next.js GitHub repository, there's an issue reported that the scroll position is reset when search params are updated. A couple of people have presented their bugs and described it right here. Before 13.2.4, updating search params was working as intended. The client state was kept and scroll position was kept too. Later on, that's not the case. So in here we have a couple of examples where the application scrolls all the way to the top, even though that shouldn't be the case. These guys are creating some kind of a form application, and when you update the state, it scrolls all the way to the top, breaking the application's usability. Similar case happened to me as well. So you can see my bug report right here. I showcase how and what is happening in our finished application. It's the same thing. So by the time you're watching this video, it is possible that this issue is fixed, in which case you will be able to find an updated explanation down in the description. Maybe you'll have to add some kind of a parameter to the router.push command that's going to keep the scroll, or maybe it's going to work by default. We're going to keep you updated in the description down below. In case that is not fixed, there's going to be a link to this GitHub issue where you can come in and you can upvote it as well, or you can even add an additional comment requesting this to be fixed. That's going to be up to you. But I just wanted to keep this real for you guys and wanted to point out that developing software, especially phenomenal tools like Next.js, is not easy. So sometimes it will take developers some time to fix these specific bugs. But again, no worries. Here in JavaScript Mastery, we always try to show you the latest and greatest stuff. And later on, I'm going to show you how we can create a fix for this solution, although there will have to be some drawbacks to it. But still, we're going to make it work without it scrolling all the way to the top. Before we implement that additional solution, which is going to be a great lesson on shit happens, let's try to find an alternative solution. Let's first finish the custom filters as well as the show more button on the bottom right here. And then I'm going to show you how to apply a fix. So with that said, let's go back to the development by putting this on the right side. We can close the issues and everything that we don't need and go back to our current application. We're currently in the page, but we might want to move below our search bar now onto our custom filters. So let's control click into the custom filter component and let's start implementing it. Our custom filter is going to use state hook for something we'll need, as well as a fragment component coming from React. And by default, since we're using a use state, it's going to have to be a use client component. Alongside using use state, we're going to also import the image coming from next/image. And we're going to import the use router coming from next/navigation. Finally, we're going to use some things from headless UI. So we can import, that's going to be a list box, as well as transition coming from add headless UI / React. Finally, in our custom filter, for now, we are passing just the title, but we're going to have to pass one additional prop, which is going to be options. So you can see that if we click the first one, we have 3 things, and on this one, we have a bit more. So we'll have to pass an array of these available options for each one of these filters. And that's not going to be tough. We can simply say options is equal to, and the first one is going to be fuels. And immediately it's going to recommend us to import the fuels from constants. And in the second time, it's going to be years of production, which we can also import at the top. That's going to be fuels and years of production coming from add / constants. And if we go into it, you can see that alongside manufacturers, we have some options as well as the options for the fuels. Great. Now, what we can do is we can go back to the custom filter, and now we know which props are we accepting. It's going to be a title, and it's going to be options. And that's going to be of a type which we are yet to create. We can go into the types, index.ts, and create a new interface right here, export const interface. Or rather, it's going to be just the interface, not const. Export interface custom filter props, which is going to have a title of string, and options, which is going to be, now bear with me, we're going to create an interface within an interface. So that's going to be option props, an array of option props. And what is option props? Well, we can create a new export interface, option props, which is going to have a title of a string and a value of a string as well. And now we're utilizing this. We're saying it's going to have an array of title and value pairs. Great. Finally, we can go back, and here we can say custom filter props, and we can import it from add / types. Great. And we can start creating the JSX of our filter using headless UI. So going back to our unfinished application, we can wrap everything in a div that's going to have a class name equal to w-fit. And inside of it, we can create a list box component. Inside of the list box, we're going to create a div, and that div is going to have a class name equal to relative w-fit and z index of 10. Inside of that div, we want to create a list box dot button, and we can give it a class name equal to custom dash filter underscore btn. If we now save this, you can see that the custom filter should go away, and it does. There's nothing there. But if we add a span element that's going to say something like filter, you can see 2 filters appear right here. Now we can create a new state at the top that's going to be created by using the use state snippet, and we can call it selected as well as set selected, and then we can get the options and use the first one. So if it's fuel, the first option in the fuel is going to be just fuel, and year is going to be a specific year on there. Now what we can do is then we can update that selected field by automatically passing the values to the list box. You can read more about this in the headless UI documentation. The way it works is just like a regular select element, where you pass a value equal to selected and an on change parameter, where we have a callback function with an event, and then you can simply do set selected and pass the event, and that's going to update the value. Now in the span, we want to show what is currently selected, so we can do selected dot title, and that's going to look something like this: fuel and year. We can of course give a class name to that span, such as block and truncate in case it's too long so it still fits on the screen. And below the span, we can render an image. That image is going to have a source equal to /chevron dash up dash down dot svg. It's going to have a width of 20 as well as a height of 20 and a class name equal to ml-4 object contain. And we can give it an alt tag equal to chevron up and down. And therefore you can see that this is now a filter and you can click on it to expand it. Of course, it's not going to work yet, but we're going to make it work really soon. And it looks like I misspelled it right here. It's going to be custom filter, not builter. So if we fix this, it's going to look so much better. Now, below the list box button, we want to create a transition. This transition is going to slowly open up the menu options for the other pickers that we can choose. So a transition. That transition is going to act as a fragment, like so. And once it leaves, it's going to leave with a transition of ease in and duration 100. It's going to leave from opacity 100 and leave to opacity 0. That's going to look something like this. You can notice how the opacity changes and it looks like it's slowly opening and closing. Great. Now, if we go down, we can put something inside of that transition, and that something is going to be a list box dot options. It's also going to have a class name equal to custom dash filter underscore underscore options. And we can map over the options by saying options.map, where we get each individual option, and we instantly return one single list box option that looks like this. Inside of there, we again have that similar statement where we can see which one is currently active or selected. So we open a new dynamic block of code, call a callback function, and then within parameters, right here, we can destructure the selected, and then we know which one is currently selected. And then we can instantly return something, and that something is going to be a span element. That's for now going to say just the option.title. If we save this, you can see everything is working, and we have 3 different options for fuel and many different options for the year. Now let's go ahead and style this a bit and also make it actually work. So we have to provide a key with the listbox option, such as the option.title, because we are mapping over it. And we can give it a value, which is going to be equal to option. Finally, we can style it just a bit. We can expand it here so we can see how it looks like. And then we can give it a relative position, cursor-default, select-none, padding Y2, padding X4 to give it some horizontal space. And then we can choose whether it is active. So for this, we need to turn it into a template string, like so. And then we can see if it is active, then give it a bg-primary-blue, as well as text-white, and then else, just give it a text-gray-900. Now, if we save this, it's gonna break because the active is not currently here. And the way we get to active is, this is really cool. Since this is a custom component from Headless UI, it allows you immediately within the class name to know which one is active. So how does that work? In the class name, believe it or not, you put a callback function like so that returns the styles, but then within the parameters, you can destructure the active state. And then you'll be able to know, is it currently active or not? So if we go down, you can see this looks good now. We can select them. And if I select gas, you can see that is the currently selected one. This is good. Same thing for the year. So now we have our options. The last part is just to style those options just a bit. So on the span, we can give it a class name equal to block and truncate. And now if it's selected, we can just make it a font medium. So we can do the same thing right here, where it's going to be a template string. And we can say if selected, then we can give it a font-medium, else we can give it a font-normal. And that should look something like this. If we select gas, you can see that maybe we cannot see it because it's hard to see because it's blue, but this one has just a bit more boldness on it. There we go. This is looking good. And that is it when it comes to our filters. But of course, we're not yet changing anything. So this is changing the selected state. And now is our turn to use these values in the same way that we used our search to update the search parameters. That's good for a couple of reasons. As the last time, it's going to help us with server-side rendering. And another reason is that if you want to share a specific set of filters or search to your friends, you don't just have to send them, for example, carcatalog.com, and then they have to implement the search themselves. You can send them a complete URL that's going to automatically for them filter the cars that you want to show them. That's the benefit when you have those e-commerce or similar types of application. You want to share a specific link and it's going to be server-side rendered. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to update the parameters of the search bar. So that's going to be const handle update params is equal to a function where we need to get our current path name. And then we have to update it. So what we can do is say const new path name is equal to, and then finally we want to do router.push and go to that new path name, which is then going to trigger server-side rendering. Now the router is not defined, so we can define it on top by saying const router is equal to use router. And now the only thing that's left to do is to figure out the current path and the search params, and then append the new currently selected ones. So doing that is going to be quite similar to what we have done with our search. So if we go to our search bar, you can see that we had right here, update search params. So we can copy this entire thing and then go back and then paste it here. Now in the search, it was a bit more complicated because we had a couple of things. Here, it's going to be simpler. The only thing we have to do first is get the current search parameters, and then we simply have to call the .set, which is going to look something like this. Search params.set, and we want to set the type of the search, which is going to be either fuel or year, and then we have to give it a value. To be able to know these, we can accept a type, which is a string through params, as well as a value, which is a string through params as well, and we can set them. Once we set them, we can simply navigate to const new path name, which is going to be a combination of the path name plus all of the search params, and then we can simply route. Now, this is a function that we can reuse a couple of times. It's not specific. So what we can do is we can copy everything from here to here and move it into a utility function. That's going to be inside of utils and then index.js. And right here next to generate car image URL, we can export const update search params. And we can now just create a function that's going to accept a type of string and a value of string. And we can open a new function block inside of which we can pass the const search params, new path name, and then we can simply return the new path name. That's going to allow us now to reuse this update search param function inside of our custom filter. So we can say const new path name is equal to update search params, to which we pass the title as well as the value. And where is the value stored? Well, the value is going to be stored in the event where we update it, right here. So instead of passing the type and the value immediately, what we can do is we can get the event, which is going to then contain the title, which is going to be of a type string, and it's going to contain the value, which is going to be of a type string. That's the case because we're going to call this function right here within the onChange of the list box. If you check this out, after we set selected, we can handle update params and pass the event, which then holds the e.value. Finally, we can call the update search params with a title. And finally, e.value.toLowerCase. And that is it. Of course, we have to import the update search params from utils. That's going to come from here. And then we simply push to the router.newPathName. Now, if we save this and try to switch to gas and press, you can see we scroll all the way to the top. Again, that same bug. But now you can see that fuel equal to gas is appended to our search query. So now if you see, all of these are gas. And for example, let's see if there are some M8s that are not gas. I doubt it, but let's check it out. And we have no results, which means that this works. Let's go back to gas. And let's also try to go for year, something like 2022. And we have a couple 2022s. So this is looking great. That means that the filters work. And now the filters are done as well. The last part to do this is to add a show more button. As you can see on the finished site, we have about 12 cars at the start. And then if you click show more, again, it scrolls to the top, but if we go down, you get more cars to check out. So we're going to implement that pagination or lazy loading, however you want to call it, using similar principles that we've used with the search and the filtering. So if we go back, that's going to happen at the end of the page.tsx, because that's where we have all the cars. So below the cars, now we need to implement the way to just show more. So what we can do is we're checking if the data is empty. And if it's not empty, we're showing all the cars. So what we want to do is below the div containing all the cars, we want to show a new component called show more. That's it. And of course, that's going to break the app right now. But we can go to our components and create a new component called show more.tsx. We can run rafce. And we can export it from our components. That's going to look like this, where we have show more. And finally, we can now import it right here. That's going to come from add/components, show more. And if we now save the file, if we scroll all the way down, you can see the show more button, which now is not a button, just a text, but soon enough we'll be able to do it. Before we go into it, we have to pass a couple of props to it. The first one is going to be a page number. It needs to know where we're currently. And the way we can do that is get the search params dot page number or 10, which could be by default. And then we need to divide that number by 10 because we're showing 10 cars per page like this. And that's going to give us the current page number. The second thing is next. Does the next page exist? Unfortunately, the API doesn't give us the total number of pages, so we have to do it manually. And we can do that by checking the search params dot limit, or 10 by default, is greater than all cars dot length. If that is the case, then it must mean that we don't have any new cars to show. Now that we know which props are we passing to the show more button, let's control click it to go into it, and let's start implementing it. Inside of here, we're going to make this component into a use client component because it's going to modify some browser functionality, such as routing. So we can immediately import the use router hook coming from next/navigation. And we can immediately get the props. It's going to be the page number, as well as is next, which is going to be equal to a specific type. So we have to pass an interface inside of the types. And that's going to be export interface, show more props. The page number is going to be just that, a number, and is next is going to be a Boolean. Great. We can go back and we can simply put this as a type of show more props coming from add/types. We can immediately initialize const router on top by saying const router is equal to router. And then later on, we're going to have a function that we're going to use for navigation. So we can say const handle navigation. And for now, we can leave it as an empty function. The JSX of the show more button is going to be pretty simple because we're going to reuse our custom button. So first, let's create a wrapper for it by giving this div a class name of w-full, flex-center, gap-5, and margin top of 10. Then we want to check, is there a next page? If there is, if not, is next is true, then we want to show a custom button. And it's going to be a self-closing component, which we of course need to import right here on top. And we need to pass a couple of props to it. The title is going to be show more. The btn type is going to be button. The container styles is going to be bg-primary-blue, rounded-full, and text-white. And finally, on handle click, it's going to handle the navigation. And now if we save this and scroll all the way down, we should be able to see something, although we don't see it yet. That's because we have a lot of different filters. We have an M8 filter right here, which means that there aren't more pages of M8 models. But if we remove this and just go to the home page and scroll all the way down, you can see that we have more cars. And if you click it, nothing's going to happen. But once we implement the handle navigation function, you'll be able to see how we can show more cars. Implementing the handle navigation is also going to be pretty simple because thankfully before we have created a utility function that's going to come in quite handy right here. We're going to say const new path name is equal to update search params. And you already know where that is coming from. add/utils. And then we can pass the limit as the new param. And then we need to update it with the new limit. So the way we can do that is create a const new limit variable, which is going to be equal to page number plus 1. And then we're going to increase the limit. If you remember correctly, the initial limit is 10. If we go to the second page, the number is going to be 1. That's going to be 1 plus 1 is 2. And therefore the limit is going to be 20, 30, 40, and so on. So we just want to update the limit to the new limit. And the update search params accepts a string as the second parameter. So we have to either wrap this in a string constructor or simply wrap it in a template string like so. Finally, we can use the router.push to push the new path name. And by itself, this should make it work. So let's expand our website to check it out. I'm going to reload the page and ensure that there are no additional parameters in search. We can currently see 12 cars right here. And if I click show more and scroll all the way down, we can see that this was the last car before. And now we have a list of new cars that shows. And you can see that the limit changed to 20. Now, if we click show more once more, the limit remained 20, which is weird. But if you click once more, it's 20 again. So something doesn't seem to be right with the way we're changing the limit. So let's look into that together so we can go more than just the second page. We are passing the page number through props from the page.tsx right here, where we say search params.page number. No, that is not a property. Search params.limit is a property. So we want to get it right here at the start, read that value, pass it over, and then it's going to know that it's currently 20, but we want to move it to 30. So now if we click once more, show more, it's going to be 30, 40, and so on, and we'll be able to see a new list of cars, which is looking great. Of course, that scroll to the top alongside the filters, search, and now even the show more is really annoying, but we'll try to find a way to fix it really soon. With that said, if you look into our app it's looking much closer to what we have on the finished website. It has the car catalog title, it has the search for the make and the model, as well as the filters for the fuel and the year, and finally, it has the show more button for the pagination. We have implemented the different images for different cars. So we have the BMW M8 competition here, 2022, and also a Mini Cooper, which we get different images for. This is looking great. And with that, we're slowly approaching the end of this phenomenal project. We have the navigation bar. We can check how does the mobile app feel and look like. And it's looking phenomenal. It is completely mobile responsive. And the pagination is on the bottom. So the only thing that's remaining to do is to fix this current bug in the Next.js 13.4 and try to find an alternative solution. And don't worry, we're going to do that right away. And try not to look at it as a pain in the ass, but rather as a lesson. As I said, by the time that you're watching this video, it is possible that this is already fixed. So definitely make sure to check out the description and check out that latest issue for the new updates. But even if it's not fixed, it is a good thing because the only alternative solution to this is to transfer the code to client-side rendering. So now we have everything with the new Next.js 13.4 server-side rendering. But we're going to show you how to transfer it to client-side, which is going to show you a clear differentiation between server-side code and client-side code rendering. This is going to strengthen your foundation on how and when to approach server-side rendering. If anything, think of this as an extra lesson to really see the benefits of server-side code. So with that said, let's convert this to client-side to show you the differences and to fix these annoying bugs that we currently have. Let's collapse our browser to the right side of the screen, and let's close all of the currently opened files. First, we can collapse everything and dive into the app page.tsx. Here is where most of the changes are going to happen, because this is the component that's going to be transitioned from a server-side page to, unfortunately, a use client page. So this is no longer going to be server-side rendered. So let's explore the differences between the two. In this case, it's no longer going to be an async function. So just export default function home. And we also cannot get search parameters from here. With the client-side approach, it's going to be more similar to your typical React application. We cannot fetch the cars right here immediately. Rather, everything is going to be spread through more use states. So let's create all of the use states that we're going to have. I'm going to create a use state snippet. And the first state is going to be all cars, set all cars, and that's going to be equal to an empty array at the start. Then we can create a second use state snippet called loading, set loading, and that's going to at the start be set to false. Then we can create all the different search states that we're going to have. So we can say use state snippet, manufacturer, and set manufacturer at the start equal to an empty string. Then we can create another, which is going to be for the modal. So modal, set modal, and then an empty string. Finally, we need to have our filter states. And if you're wondering, how am I creating these states so quickly? Well, I start typing use state, I click use state snippet, which allows you to use a tab key to traverse through different parts of this. So first of all, you say fuel, you press tab, and then immediately you can specify the default value, which is going to be an empty string. So let's keep this going. We also need a state for year and set year at the start, set to 2022. And finally, we need to get the limit, which is the pagination state. So that's going to be use state, limit, set limit at the start equal to 10. And I can see that I didn't even import use state. So we can import it at the top coming from React right here. And now that we have all of those states, we're going to also use a useEffect hook. It accepts a callback function, and it's going to be executed whenever any of these parameters change. So whenever fuel changes, the year, the limit, the manufacturer, or the model change, we're going to recall our useEffect, which we also have to import at the top from React. Now, inside of here, we want to call a function that's going to refetch the cars. So we can say get cars. And this is a function that we can create just above the useEffect. Const get cars is equal to an async function where we're going to do something similar to what we did before. So maybe I shouldn't have removed the initial fetch for all cars because we need something incredibly similar. So right now, I'm going to go all the way back by holding Control and then Z just to remove all of those states. And you can do the same, but be really careful. And now I can copy the fetch cars and hold Control-Shift-Z to go all the way forward. It's going to be something similar on Mac as well. So within the get cars, we want to do what we were initially doing in the server-side approach, where we do const all cars, or rather we're going to call it a result in this case, await fetch cars, and then we pass all of these additional options. But no longer are these going to come from search params, rather we're getting them immediately from the state. Once we get the cars, we can simply set all cars to be equal to the result. Again, this might be something that you're used to if you were working with React for a long time. Also, a good practice here would be to copy this and remove it and put it within a try and catch and finally block, which looks something like this. The code that we have goes into the try. In the catch, we can simply console.log the error. And then in the finally, we're going to set the loading to false. And initially, we're going to set the loading to true. So we want to have some kind of a loading state because Next.js is no longer doing that for us. So now we have all of the states and we are fetching the cars. And if we now save this, we haven't saved in a long time, and go back, you're going to see that we have some kind of errors because we're still referencing search params here on the bottom. So no longer this is going to be search params. Now we immediately have the limit in the state. If we save it, we get a couple more errors, but it looks like we're good. Believe it or not, we can see all the cars. So now we're back at status quo. We're back at where we started, where we can see all the cars. We're fetching them client-side now, but we are not utilizing the set states. So now we cannot modify anything using these things right here. So that's going to be the next step. In the search bar right here, we'll have to pass some states down. And that's going to be set manufacturer is equal to set manufacturer. And we're going to also pass the set model is equal to set model. We're passing it true. In the filters, we're going to have to pass the set state. So in the custom filter, we're going to pass the set filter to be equal to set fuel. And for the second one, we're also going to pass a set filter, which is going to be equal to set year. Then below the all cars.length right here, we no longer have this is data empty. So what we can do is we can say if all cars.length is greater than 0, like this, then we display all the cars. And also below this div, we can render a loading tag. So we can say if we are loading, we're going to show our loading right here. That's going to be a div that's going to have an image. And that image is going to have a source equal to /loader.svg, alt tag equal to loader, width of 50, height of 50, and class name equal to object contain. The div itself is also going to have a class name equal to mt16 to divide it from the top, w-full, and flex-center. Now, we haven't yet imported the image, so let's import the image from next image right here at the top, and that's good. Now, if we reload, we should be able to see some cars loading right here. And we also have to change the show more button. To the show more button, we're going to pass the page number, which is going to be just limit divided by 10. The isNext is going to be if limit is greater than all cars that length. And then we can simply pass the set limit to it as well, because now it's a manual state. That's all that we need to do in our page, but now we have to dive into the search bar, into the custom filter, and into the show more to be able to make these work with the client-side approach. And now we can go into the search bar and accept the set manufacturer as well as set model. You can see that these names clash with our current states that we have here. So let's rename our manufacturer to search manufacturer and search model. And let's also rename their setter functions to set search manufacturer and set search model. Now you can notice that we have the name clashing here. So let's rename our manufacturer to search manufacturer, and we can rename all of the instances of this variable by simply pressing the F2 key on Windows at least, and you can simply type search manufacturer. You can repeat the procedure with the set manufacturer to set search manufacturer, and repeat the process with the model, search model, and this is going to be set search model, like so. So now you can see that here it's going to say search manufacturer, search model, search model, search manufacturer. And we no longer want to update the actual URL params. The only thing we want to do is set them to the state. So now we can say set model is equal to search model, like so. And repeat that for the manufacturer. Set manufacturer is set, and then we pass the search manufacturer. Great, so this part is now good. And then we no longer need to use this function to update the search params, so we can delete it. Now, keep in mind, we have to pass the data to the search manufacturer subcomponent because it is the one that's actually changing those values. So here we can pass the selected as the search manufacturer and set selected as the set search manufacturer. There we go. Finally, we can modify the input for the model. It's no longer going to say set model. This time it's going to be set search model right here, and ensure that the variable is search model right here. And we now can go into the search manufacturer to modify these values. No longer we're getting the manufacturer and the set manufacturer. Now we're simply renaming them to selected and set selected, which make more sense. So here in our combo box, we can pass the value as selected and on change set selected. There we go. So now if we try out the search, it should be working. Let's try with Audi and click search, and we get an error, which is okay. It says set model is not a function on search bar line 33. So if we look into 33, it's going to be here. We have a set model, and it looks like I missed the curly braces, which we need to destructure the params being passed into the function. So if I fix it and try to go with something like Aston Martin and click search, it actually works. You can see that the images change and the titles change as well. And let's try to go for a specific model. Let's try to search Vantage. So I'm going to pass that as a model right here. And we can see that there is only one. So that means that the search for both the manufacturer and the make work. And as you saw, this time, no longer do we have an issue where it just scrolls all the way to the top of the page. Now we can immediately see the changes live right here, which is great. Now let's fix the fuel and the year as well. So for that, we have to go to the custom filter component. And then in the custom filter, we're getting an additional parameter, which is set filter. And the only thing we have to do is no longer update the params right here. So we can delete that part as well as delete the use router. And instead of handle update params, we simply need to set filter like so. Now, if we save this, this should be working. So if we change the fuel to electricity, we don't have any Ferraris that are electric. But if we try to go back, it doesn't seem to work. So let's try that one more time by removing everything from the search query. And let's try to go with something like, let's do something different this time. Let's do a Chevy and search. Okay, that worked. The image is changed. And now we can switch to electricity. No cars. What about gas? No, the gas didn't seem to work. So let's go check out if we're properly updating the filters. In the page, we have the get cars that update when the fuel or the year change. So in here, we can console log the fuel or the year and see how does that look like. As a matter of fact, why not console log all of them to see what the current state of the properties is? So I'm going to open up a console and reload the page. Immediately, we have a warning for the key prop, which is okay. But now, if we try to do the same thing we did before, that's going to be a Chevrolet. And let's try to see if it gets updated. If I expand it just a bit, we have the search here. Yep, that's good. The values are updated. And now we can change to gas. As you can see, the title and the value seem to be gas. That's from the fuel that we can see right here. And then we have the additional properties of year and everything else. So it looks like for the year, we get just the year. But if we try to change it again, now it turns into this object key value pair where we have the title and the value, not necessarily just the value which we need. So let's fix that. The only thing we need to do to fix it is here in the set filter, we need to say e.value, which then should update it properly. So now if we go back, scroll down, go for something like Chevrolet one more time, and check the electricity, it's going to go to none, back to gas, and we are good. Now let's try with something we had before, just to verify it is working. So let's go back to Audi, search. This is looking good, and the images appear one more time. Let's see if Audi has some electric cars. No results for the Q5 2015, but if we reset the year, nope, still nothing. So, yep, this is looking good to me. If we go back, we have some cars. Wonderful. The filters and the search are working, and the last thing that we have to do is going to be the show more. So if we scroll all the way down, we should have a show more button. Right now we don't because we are just searching for it. But if we reload the page, the button should be right here at the end. And if we click it right now, it's not going to do anything. But if we go into it right here in the show more, we can now make it work by accepting the set limit property. And instead of pushing to this new route and updating the params, the only difference we have to make is set limit to be equal to new limit. And no longer we're using the router. This is the only difference. So now if we save this and click show more, you can see how immediately the cars appear and it's not scrolling all the way to the top, which is exactly what we want. Wonderful. And with that, we have successfully converted the app from server side to client side. Again, just use this as an educational lecture on the differences between the two. As you saw, the new Next.js way where we simply call the fetch cars immediately on top based on the search params was, in my opinion, cleaner. With the client-side approach, you're going to have a lot of states and you'll have to manage it all manually and then refetch it using the useEffect hook. Another thing that you can notice is that now if we switch some parameters like fuel to gas or year to 2022 and maybe go for something like an M8 right here, you're going to notice that no longer does our URL change. So now if you want to copy this URL and share it with your friend, when they reload the page and come back, they're going to be back to all the regular cars and not the servers that you had. And also, since it's client-side, it should be a bit slower. But again, take it as an educational lesson to see the differences between the two. In case you want to revert it to server-side, you'll be able to see that in our code base, there's going to be a couple of branches right here. There's going to be the main branch with the server-side code, and then the client-side version. So if you want to see the differences from the two versions, immediately checking them out in the pull request right here should be possible. So this is going to allow you to see all of the differences between the two, how we had to add all of those states, remove the search params way, and then manually fetch the cars. But hopefully the Next.js team fixes that small bug of changing the scroll position when we change the URL parameters. With that said, we came to the end of this phenomenal build and we are ready to get it deployed to the internet. So let's do that next. We've created this application using Next.js, and Next.js is owned and created by Vercel. So we're going to use it for deployment. Go to vercel.com and click Start Deploying. Then continue with your GitHub. Next, in here, you'll be able to see all of your GitHub repositories, which means that now is the time to deploy our project to GitHub. So go to github.com and then create a new repository. I'm going to call it cars_showcase. And I'm going to leave it as public. Next, create a repository. Back in our code, we can stop the terminal from running by pressing Ctrl+C and then Y. We can clear it and then run git init. Git commit -m initial commit. And we must not forget git add before and then git commit -m initial commit. Finally, we can do git branch -m main, copy the following command, git remote add origin, and finally git push u origin master. That's the only thing we need to do to push our repository to GitHub. Once it's there, you can go back to Vercel and immediately it's going to show right here. So you can just click import. Now, in case you use some environment variables, you'll have to copy them from your .env and put them right here into environment variables. In my case, I put the keys in the code, so I can just go ahead and click deploy. It looks like I have to navigate to my other account right here. And I'm gonna just try to click deploy again and hopefully everything goes right. And there we go. The deployment process has started. Let's give it a few minutes and I'll be right back. It looks like the build has failed. And if we checked it out, that's because now we're getting all of the TypeScript errors that we didn't necessarily fix in our application when we were converting it to client side. For now, just to go through this quickly, I'm going to go to next.config.js. And then within here, below images, we can say TypeScript. And there, we can say ignore build errors is set to true. Now, of course, we have to commit this. So we can do git add, git commit -m, ignore errors, and then git push. This is going to push it. And immediately we can reload the page. And you can see a new ID is going to be added to our project name, which is when you can click deploy. And there we go. Our application has been deployed and this is looking great. So let's click it. And that's going to open it right on this URL, which means that the application is now live. So if we scroll down and try to go with something like Audi, and let's do something like A4 this time and click search, you can see it is actually working. The images are getting reflected. And let's see if there are any electric ones. I don't think so, but if we go back, it works. And you can also change the year to something like 2022, and that works as well. Wonderful. With that said, we've came to the end of this phenomenal build where we had an extra lesson of discussing the differences between client-side and server-side rendering. And hopefully with this, now you can see the benefits of Next.js's server-side rendering. As I mentioned in the intro, this application was a lighter version of the application that our masterclass students have built. Here is the final design. As you can see, it is much more comprehensive, and it allows you to actually add your own cars, not just fetch them from the API, search them based on filters, and then see car details, and finally rent them. This is going to, of course, allow you to implement full CRUD functionalities, turning this into a full stack Next.js or MERN application, whatever you prefer. So if you're with us in the masterclass and you encounter an issue such as that bug in Next.js where we had an issue with the scroll position, we would be there for you to help you immediately solve it and ensure that you learn as much as possible from the process. So if you're sure you want to become an expert software engineer, join us, graduate within 6 months, get your dream job within another 6, and get all the support from the mentors, or you get your full money back. With that said, thank you so much for watching this phenomenal build. It truly was a pleasure to build it and to have you all with me alongside in the process. And please let me know in the comments down below, what would you like to see next? Maybe a clone of a popular build? Maybe more Next.js? Supabase? Prisma? I don't know. Let me know what you'd like to see more of in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.